Get things rolling here. Everybody's ready. We're close to it anyway. You doing okay? All right. We'll call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do have a quorum. All 5 directors are here today. We don't have a report out of closed session, do we? Because we really didn't have one last week?
No closed session last week.
Okay, thank you. All right, we need to review the agenda. We're going to be very tight on time today because we have to do some things in closed session. And so we need to try to get everything done by 5 o'clock so then we can extend our time and go to closed session. So I would like to reorder a few things so that we hit the things that are highest priority. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to move items G and H, which have to be done today, and have them follow item number B. So everything else would move down a little bit. G and H would move up to right after B. Any objections to look that over and see what you think? And if we run out of time, we'll just either push things to September, or we will have to have a continuation session next week, I guess. All right. Everybody good? Yes? All right. So, item number 2, public comment. We'll start with that. I have a couple of slips. Here comes some more, but we will start with Karen Dean and then Christine Heinrichs, please.
Hi, Karen Dean, Cambria, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Green Space, the Cambria Land Trust. I wanted to re-invite everyone to our August 17th grand opening of our native plant demonstration garden at Pocahontas Park. It is from 1 to 4, and it's the corner of Wilton Drive and Newton Drive. Parking is available at the Cambria Community Presbyterian Church parking lot, and we'll have complimentary shuttle service by the Cambria Community Bus. I would also like to thank the many volunteers who showed up for our volunteer day last Saturday to help us spruce up the gardens ahead of time. We had a lot of people come and get their shovels and rakes out and get their hands dirty and help make sure everything's all neat and tidy. And I also want to thank the neighbors around Pocahontas Park for letting us use their green waste containers. Anyway, I hope you all can show up, and there's flyers out there on the table in the lobby. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Christine Heinrichs.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'd like to ask the board if it's possible for Director Howell to explain further his requirements for public comment to be heard at the Resources and Infrastructure Committee. It was kind of a complicated list of rules as to who can comment and how. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all we have for public comment right now. Would you like to address that, Director Howell?
I'll try to be brief. That's not one of my strong points. It's not an issue as to public comment per se. That's we're subject to the same rules that this board is in terms of the Brown Act. Rather, it has to do with the inclusion of written comments in the minutes of the meeting. And for that, I've suggested or wanting to enforce a somewhat more liberal policy than what is in our board bylaws regarding our board meetings. And basically it is as follows. If the person is at the R&I meeting and makes a public comment, and they have that comment also in writing, or at least something very like what they had to say, they may ask to have their written remarks included in the minutes of that meeting. Now remember, that's if the person is at the meeting and speaks at the meeting and the written comments somehow accurately reflect the spoken comments. The other possibility is, there are two. One, a person who normally comes to the meetings, but because of either personal reasons or because, in particularly the last case that we had, where the meeting has been moved from its regular date and therefore the person could not appear, I will accept written comments from that person, and I would prefer that those comments be read by some other attendee at the meeting who reads those comments in the absent person's behalf. In the event that such a person cannot be found, I will read the comment from the chair. But that is only for people who normally show up, but who for some good reason are unable to attend. I'm trying to think, there was a third thing which is escaping me at the moment. Let's leave it at that. I hope that helps to clarify matters a bit here. I have to say that I did include some material from in one of our earlier meetings simply because I had not yet publicly made that policy, made the public aware of that, and it did not seem fair. So that's the rules that I'll be operating under, absent any further direction from the board on that.
President Farmer.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to interject that one of the things that came up was that a letter that was sent to the R&I committee was put in the minutes, but the people that had that letter didn't attend the meeting, and that became a little bit of a discussion, right? Yeah. So it was put in the minutes, even though it wasn't spoken to. Nobody got up and presented it, so it shouldn't have been in the minutes, right?
All right, does our legal counsel have anything to weigh in on here as to whether we're proper or not? Okay, good. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. I will now open the public hearing to discuss and adopt Resolution 32, 2019, approving the final CCSD budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 and reserve for encumbrances fiscal year 2018-2019. Is there any, I have one request to speak from the public. If you do want to speak, now is the time to turn in a slip and we'll get you up there. And we'll start with Ms. Bittenhausen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I had to check this morning at Santa Rosa Creek Beach, and I'm sad to report that a wonderful flock of snowy plover had to fly away as tourists and dogs and locals were after that poor little flock of threatened birds. And so I just had to do that to keep me familiar with who I am. And of course, that means that since there's a meeting today of you, I have to come and speak with you or to you or at you, however you choose your prepositions, about, guess what? So-called SWF budget. Now, I know you've all discussed this 40 times, including the Finance Committee. So I just want to tell the public out there in viewerland 3 things. Number 1, please, board, explain why in the budget for this fiscal year 1920, only 3 sources of revenue are given. That is for single family residents for base usage and interest. In previous years, the revenue was listed from the basin usage for vacation rentals, commercial lodging, and commercial water. Why are the revenue figures greatly increased for residential and not listed at all for commercial? 2, why do salary and wages in so-called SWF operations increase from, I'll round them off, $69,000 this year to $172,000 next year? I like math, and so I figured it out. That's an increase of 147% from one fiscal year to the next. And especially since there's no projection for operating the plant in this fiscal year until June 30th of 2020, it's a little odd. Number 3, so is the fact that the benefits go up that much. I'd like an explanation, please. I'm sure you've got an excellent reason for doing this, and all I'd like to do is hear it. And of course, number 4, let's guess, Elizabeth is raising again the administrative cost allocation. I know where it sits in your budget. The administrative cost allocation for so-called SWF is not listed as an expenditure for SWF this year, even though in the past fiscal year it was, but in the past 2 prior fiscal years it wasn't. The regular water fund now, the money we pay for our regular water rates, is paying for SWF administrative cost allocation once again. That would be piddly diddly squeak, wouldn't it? Except it's $381,000 this year. And if you look at your budget for SWF, it shows that there is basically already deficit spending for this coming fiscal year of $127,820, and you add to that a major expenditure, namely what it has to pay administration to do some work, and you get a grand total of $509,387 deficit spending again for this plant, which is not even operating under its current permit. Now, friends, I will spare you elaboration because my time has run out.
Thank you. Ms. Bittenhausen also sent us a couple of emails in the last month or so, and as chairman of the Finance Committee, Director Steidel has prepared a response, and she's got copies of that available. Are they out at the...
Actually, they're right here, and we can make these available to Mr. Grid.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So certainly give one to Dr. Bettenhausen, and then the rest can, if you would like to see one of these, please raise your hand, and Ms. Madrid will give it to you, and Director Steidel, please.
So in a general sense, rather than addressing individual items, which would require basically dragging in a file cabinet and pulling out hundreds of folders to show where a number comes from. What I'd like to do is provide a general discussion and explanation for orientation to the actions that were taken during the budget process, and provide some information and answers relative to the alignment questions that were posed. The Prop 218 Bartles and Wells study had 2 underlying assumptions. One, that water was treated as a single enterprise comprised of 3 components. One was water, which is the Water Fund, Department 11. Then the Sustainable Water Facility, which is operations, which is the Water Fund 39, Department 25. And the Sustainable Water Facility, the Capital Fund, which is the Water 40, Department 30. The other underlying assumption is that water is water. It's drawn from the same source, no matter how it was originally generated. Now, that last item, water is water, there are 2 things that that sit below that in terms of its position. One is the fiscal year 16-17 audit report stated the same kind of concept that water is water no matter what the source, because the water was treated as a single entity in that audit. The other thing is that the breakout of the SWIF was the result of transparency requirements to that were established by the lender. So the idea that the SWF was broken out in terms of operations and capital was a requirement that was imposed by the lender for visibility and for transparency, not because it was a separate item to the concept of water. Also, the rate structures that were generated for the Prop 218 study did not define an allocation of administrative costs for each component, but rather for the enterprise as a whole and recorded in the water, the Fund 11. And this approach is in alignment with the assumption, the second assumption that I addressed, the water is water. The staff, the Standing Finance Committee, and the board wanted to ensure that the enterprise budget structure was aligned to the Proposition 218 rates for full disclosure and community visibility of the budget versus the 218 projected rate revenues, because that's what we heard from the community. The community determined that that was a very important aspect for their visibility. And in order to measure our operations as compared to what the 218 assumed, staff finance actually had to realign the administrative cost allocations for water solely to the Water Fund 11. Otherwise, it would not have been able to measure our projected budget and incurred cost against the Prop 218 projected revenues. In viewing the water enterprise on a summary level, the total water, the comparison of the FY 1920 budget is within 3% of the Prop 218 estimate. In addition, the detailed budget for Water Fund 11 provides detail of the administrative cost allocation for the individual components, so visibility is not lost at that level, and you'll see that in the budget details. Additionally, I wanted to respond to Dr. Bentonhausen regarding the questions related to percentage increases and employee benefits. Just in general, as observation, the budget development for all of the benefits is approached in a systematic framework of calculation for medical, dental, and retirement. Every person in every division was reviewed in the calculations. As orientation, most all benefit costs are defined by existing constraints. The benefits are defined by union contracts and the employee contracts. Rates for tiers of retirement are set by PERS. The medical and dental pool of insurance market offerers is limited and specific to special districts. So we don't have a lot of the flexibility of going out and shopping against insurance in a lot of other environments that maybe other organizations might. The only real calculation variable is the actual number of employees receiving benefits. The rest of the calculators against those numbers of people are actually defined for us through contracts or through the insurance available to us. As far as the salaried employees, the new rates from the insurance carriers were not yet available, so best estimates of increase were used in calculation for the budgeting process. Any significant differences in these assumptions can be reviewed at the mid-year budget review and, if appropriate, adjusted accordingly. The two percentages that were used and assumed for the budget development were medical increase of 9% and dental increase of 7.5%. As relates to PERS, the rates are available and were applied as appropriate in the different tiers defined within PERS: safety, classic, second tier, PEPRA, and then the unfunded liability that has to do with the 10-year smoothing. The total pool impacts associated with the head count, based on the Prop 218 rate initiative, initial head count was added and addressed in the budget. One was for a water enterprise employee, and there were 2 wastewater employees. If the position is vacant at the onset of the budget, the expected head count cost is still identified and included in the overall benefits calculation. This is a risk mitigation approach and appropriate for sound budgetary development. In the case of medical and dental benefits, the range of cost changes depend on the number of dependents chosen by each employee. That's why it's calculated and looked at it on an employee level. For budgeting purposes, the additional head count was assumed to be a family with dependent. Again, this is a risk mitigation approach and appropriate for sound budgetary development. That assumes that that would be a worst case condition, and if we find that the budget requirements don't reach that level, then we will make adjustments accordingly in the mid-year budget review. Other considerations. We're not a large entity. The pools created by these costs are relatively small. As a result, any increase can easily result in a percentage number seeming large or skewed, particularly if the head count of the pool is increased. In other areas where defined percentages were not available, the development of the budgetary data has been calculated by specific constraints down at the lowest possible level and built up. Where percentages had to be assumed, they are documented and established by sound financial planning. The employee benefit costs developed during the 1920 budgetary process has been well delineated by our finance manager and have had process reviews by the ad hoc budgetary committee of the Finance Standing Committee, reviewed again by the overall Finance Standing Committee, and in several iterations through the preliminary budget review and the final budget review before being brought to the board for consideration. It has probably had more financial expertise and capability applied to it than any other budget ever brought before this district or this board. So I'm hoping that by documenting some of those pieces of information for the community, it provides, rather than just a narrative and an exchange and a challenge to a specific number, that if you have the opportunity to take a look at some of the specifics related to the information that I've reviewed with you here, that it will provide some additional level of understanding of what the process represented and accomplished. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. I would like to say that Dr. Bettenhausen does an excellent job of sending these emails to us and asking the questions, and we do like to respond. And again, if we haven't responded to all of your inquiries, please let us know, Dr. Bettenhausen. There's one that wasn't covered that she brought up today, which was the additional salary and benefit for the SWIFT, which I'm sure that the finance manager is prepared to talk to. So I'll now turn it over to Ms. Duffield.
Do you want me to answer the SWF question now? Okay. So yes, the SWF budget does look a little inflated as compared to the actuals for the current fiscal year, and that is mostly because we've had a couple of staffing shortages through the history of the fiscal year. One of those is a key manager in the water department is out on leave. So the SWF manager that's fully budgeted in that unit has been covering both areas. So you will see a reduction in salary in 18-19 as compared to 19-20 when both divisions would be fully staffed. The other item is that we had our district engineer retire in December. His position is split 33% between water, wastewater, and SWF. So not having him on the books for 6 months in the actual cost would create a variance to budgeting him for the full fiscal year in the new fiscal year. So, I mean, it's just kind of the evolution of staffing. It's hard to predict. We're always going to have, people leave and people start. So there's always going to be some fluctuation in our salary numbers.
Great, thank you. I like the conservative way that you went about formatting the budget and reviewing the budget, because then, this should be the maximum we're going to be spending unless we have unforeseen items come up that we need to address. But it makes it a lot better, and eventually we're going to hire these people, hopefully, and get them on board, and we've got the money then budgeted to handle that expense. So thank you. All right, back to you again.
Okay, so I'm going to start at the beginning now.
Good.
So for fiscal year 1920, we are not proposing any significant changes to the budget differently from what the board approved back in June during the preliminary process. Our expenditures and our revenues, we're not proposing any changes to those. The only change that we are proposing is related to the actual expenditures that occurred in fiscal year 18-19 in the capital outlay section of each division's budget. So the district is under some contractual obligations to continue those services, and it's kind of been done differently over the years in CCSD. We've taken the approach this year that we're going to request a reserve for encumbrance. So basically what that means is we're asking for reserves that would normally be just, unspent money that would be put into reserves at the end of the year. We're asking for that to be moved forward into the New Year's budget. And so I've outlined all of those capital projects. For the general fund, the only division that has any capital projects that need to carry forward and any contract obligations is in the administrative division, and that is due to the financial system implementation that is still ongoing. So there's $76,000 requested to carry forward into the new year. And all of these carry forward requests are listed on page 68 of your packet if you wanted to follow along. In water, there's several capital projects that are also in process. There's the SCADA system upgrade that is not yet complete, the pedestrian bridge project that is not complete, and then on page 68 there was an error on that third project line. It says operating transfers out to SWF Capital for $50,000. That is an incorrect title. And that should be the carry forward of the water meter replacement project. That is what it should be carried forward. It has nothing to do with SWF. And then for the SWF operational budget, the impoundment basin, those efforts were started in fiscal year 18-19, but they were not complete until early into July in 1920. So we're asking for the remaining budget in that line item to be carried forward. And then we have a subsequent line item on the agenda today to address the cost related to that as well. So that's some more follow-up information. SWF Capital, we have 2 contracts that we are under right now, and that's the biological consultant and the basin evaluation. Those contracts were not paid in full at the end of 18-19, so we're requesting that those funds be carried forward. And then in the wastewater division, we're also not complete with the lift station upgrade, and so those funds will also need to be carried forward. That and the handrails, I believe, is what it was, lift station upgrade and then the handrails. So I know that's kind of a new concept to the district as a whole. So what my plan would be is, if the board approves those items to be carried forward, I would insert a column when you're looking at the New Year's budget, the quarterly reports. We will have the approved final budget in there as per the preliminary budget was approved, and then I'll insert a column in there to show the carry forwards that came over so that they're not hidden in the numbers. It'll be very clear what was carried forward versus any new fiscal year budget adjustments that could happen, during the year as it goes. So I think that about covers it. I have an updated reserve spreadsheet as well. I included that in the back of the packet, which is on page 73. And it's no different than what you saw at the preliminary budget. It's just basically a recording of updating how fiscal year 18-19 ended versus what our projected numbers were. When we thought how the year would end, we actually know how it did end now. So I updated that line item. And so that's our best guess on the reserves at that point. Recall it's still unaudited financials. We're still in the process of that for 17-18 fiscal year. And as we get those numbers audited and reconciled, I'll be updating this and bringing you forward that information. So
Okay, very good.
Happy to answer any questions.
Director Stardale.
I just want to say I appreciate the fact that when you're talking about the encumbrance requests and the carry forwards, you took the additional time to describe how you intended to follow through with that and how it would be represented in future information that's brought before the board and the community. It's appreciated.
Okay, any other questions or anything? I have a couple for you. The salaries that we have in the budget today do not reflect any of the monies that we may incur after our union negotiations. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay.
We did not inflate any salary for any group based on any COLAs that could possibly be approved. That would have to go, when that gets approved by the board, we would have to do a budget adjustment along with that.
Okay, very good. My second one is under the fire department and the facilities department, there were some line items called new request.
Yes. So,
But there was no delineation anywhere. I kept looking for, okay, here are what the new requests are, but I didn't see anything in there.
so basically what I did is, and I explained this to finance as well, because we had some questions during that. I was trying to really leave the requests out there that were new, or there were divisions that were asking for additional funding over and above what funding they had. Like, say the fire department, for instance, for their office supplies, maybe they had $1,000 requested in past years, and then they asked for an additional $500 to be added to their budget. So that would have been listed on a new request. So I tried to list them out there separately because they just kind of get lost in the line item if I just inflate the line item to total up with all their budget requests. So we were trying a new format. We were trying to be really transparent about everybody's requests and what we could fund and what we couldn't fund. So, if your preference is for me to roll it up to that line item, I would be happy to do that. But I just left it out there on its own line so that it was very clear what those new requests from staff were.
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's just, I just couldn't figure out what it was for. Now I know that it really is for the line item above that. It's just
Yes.
additional money that they think they're going to need.
Right. And I purposely left out the general ledger account number in that column
Because it's.
just to highlight it. So if I had put the charge code down, it just wouldn't have been so evident that it was a new request.
Makes sense to me. Nice transparency again. Fire department.
Okay.
There's nothing in there for the sale of the old engine as a revenue source.
I'm not aware that we're selling an old engine.
Well, I hope we are.
Are we selling an old engine?
The chief was here,
Where's
but
the
he's
chief?
gone. Yeah, we don't really need that one anymore, and I know he has plans to sell it, and I was hoping that it would happen this fiscal year, which would give him some more money to do other things, but
At the
perhaps
time of,
the general
yeah.
manager is making a note, so I'm sure we'll
I
hear
will
about
too.
this.
At the time of the budget preparation, we did not have this discussion, so.
Okay.
But
And
we
it would
will.
have to be authorized by the board to sell
Right, to
it,
surplus,
correct?
Right, to
correct,
sell it. Yeah,
Right.
but he can offer it out there, I think, without.
correct. We would need to come to the board to request a surplus of a fixed asset in order to do that.
Right, okay. A couple more before I let everybody else in. The administration salary group was reduced by some $95,000, and I am assuming that's the end of the payout to the old general manager. Is that where that mostly comes from?
Correct.
Okay. And last, I talked to the general manager about this the other day, but I would really like to see a separate account number for keeping track of the money we spend on homeless camp cleanup and whatever else we have to do to on the homeless issue, so that we have a real accounting of how much money we're spending on that issue, so that we can use that maybe in negotiations with the county at some point.
Okay, I can add a charge code for that, and that would be referenced in the facilities and resources budget. Under
Yes.
their services and supplies, we can add a line to that. Carlos is working on a couple of cleanups as we speak. I think they're around the magnitude of 15,000, and they're within his budget. But I will make sure when those costs get coded that they're on a identified line.
Yeah, I think that would really be helpful for all of us. Okay. All right, Director Howell.
A couple of comments and a question. First of all, I don't think it's possible that one could come up with a format for something this complicated that would please everybody. There's always going to be some questions. So my compliments to Ms. Duffield and to the Finance Committee for the really very nice and clear, still raise some questions, but very clear, and a good attempt at making things as clear as possible. I may be mistaken on this, but this is our second year of operating in the black, I think. Maybe someone can correct me on that. We are in the black, though, on this budget. Is that not the case?
Correct.
I couldn't find the spot where I had noted that, but that is a positive thing no matter how you look at it. If you look at the whole thing as a whole, even though certain aspects may be in deficit, as the district as a whole, we are solvent and we're in good shape.
Yes.
Not to say that we don't have a lot of problems.
So for the general fund, we came ahead for the year overall by $29,000. That'll be put into reserves, and that's after taking forward our encumbrance into the new year. And then for all the enterprise funds, let's see where we ended. I don't have my enterprise fund. Hold on, let me get to it. The enterprise fund was ahead as well. It is on page, there's a summary sheet. Oops, sorry, keep hitting the microphone. And so the enterprise fund as a whole on page 41 at the very bottom came out ahead by $693,000.
That's pretty impressive, I think. So that's a positive take on this whole thing, because often we see ourselves beset with innumerable problems, but at least it looks like we're headed in a good direction. For the future, there's two things that I think the public may have some issues having to do with the fact that since we show on the bill, we show certain amounts of the bill are for water, certain amounts on the bill are for the new water facility. So the public has some reason to be concerned if they see that, the rates that they're paying for the water are used to subsidize the deficit for the new water facility. That's an understandable concern. Even though, as a whole, when you look at water, as Director Steidel was saying, if water is regarded as water, then some of that goes away. But you can see, I just want to bring that forth to explain why we may be getting some blowback from folks who are really very concerned. They voted for the rate increase, but they really did not want the money that they were paying for their water usage to go to support the plant. Okay, having said that, and there's nothing we can change about that. For what I'm unable to determine from the budget, and which is not a bad thing, but I'm just putting this forth for future as something that in the accounting system we might want to look at, is a question I have, and I think others may have, which is two aspects regarding the new water plant. One is, how much does it cost to maintain the plant in readiness to be used as needed? What does that cost us? We have pickling charges, we have to pay operators, certain fixed charges that would be the same every year except for possible salary increases and price increases. But that's a number that I think it would be very useful to be able to put forth. Then the other question is, how much will, and this is unknown right now, I suspect, but how much will it actually cost to run it? As I say, the operations cost versus the cost of maintaining it. Those are two figures that I think would be of great interest to everyone, certainly me. I'm not asking for the answer now, but as we go forward, I can see there might be some use in perhaps accounting for things in a way that you could pull out and answer those questions. So just as a thought as we go forward. But generally, I'm very pleased with the budget. I like it.
Great, thank
It's
you.
a good job.
Vice President Farmer.
I would wish to concur with Director Howell, knowing how hard all of the staff over there have worked on this budget, including Mr. Ogren. Give him some kudos, but I know that Pam often works 7 days a week and didn't get a heck of a lot of sleep. And so, Pam, I hope you're sleeping a little better now. And
Maybe.
Maybe, okay.
Maybe after today.
Maybe after today. Well, I do want to mention with regard to, Director Howell just said that we're solvent and in good shape. I'm not so sure the difference, let's say, with regard to expenditures and revenue is that much different, but at least we should be grateful that that has taken place. Because in recent years, expenditures outpaced revenue for a number of years. I just want to let people to know that. And also one year, I believe it was the year that I got on the board and the fiscal years kind of overlapped, the reason we were able to balance the budget was that we pushed all of the necessary improvements for the wastewater facility down the road. So these are things that have happened in the past. I'd also like to address, if I can just, there were other things, but I think they've been kind of covered. So just to get to page 55, which is the Water Facility Operations Department on line 173, which is basically total expenditures. And as we can see, we have it for the last 4 fiscal years, as well as the one upcoming year. So I just wanted to point out, just in the last 3 fiscal years, the expense has been, well, the last 3 fiscal years, it was 3.6 million. This fiscal year, 1.1 million. So that's a total of $4.8 million in expenses for the SWF operation. Well, let me put it this way, the water plant operation. And I know there's some misunderstandings and misconceptions as to what we're getting from this plan. The plan hasn't operated. Many people are aware, some not, that it hasn't operated. We haven't received any water from it since December 23rd of 2016. And I do want to mention, we can see here the expense, in 2017, 2018, at $1.4 million, slightly less in 2018, 2019. And this year, $1.1 million. And so why do things fluctuate? Well, we've had all these various unexpected events that have taken place during the course of these years. We had to have after we had the first environmental impact report, because of some of the flawed addressing of environmental concerns, we had to have a supplemental environmental impact report. There was also a need for the brine pond, addressing that issue, also having to have an environmental consultant, which is in the budget this time. We had the cost of late reports that fortunately the community got a real break on, because the amount was about 10 times more than what we had to pay as a community and as a district. And staff salaries, some of the staff salaries, you might feel that they have been included here, but I would say this, just in talking with our former Chief Engineer, Mr. Greshens, that he said that the majority of time that he's spent since this facility began to be developed and built and so forth, he said the large majority of his time was spent on that facility. So we, I guess in some ways, could include the majority of his salary. So I just wanted to point out how much we have been paying towards this facility that isn't operating. We may get fortunate, by the way, because we often have expenditures we don't anticipate. We may get fortunate this year, who knows when we'll know, that the lawsuit that we have with regard to the impoundment basin, we may win that lawsuit and actually get some benefit. So I just thought I'd throw that in, as, just to put the truth out there. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Anyone else comment? Yes, Director Rice.
This is a follow-up question to the new request. I just want to get an example so that I know that I understand it correctly. I'm looking at page 23. Near the top, it says the third line down says it's fund account number 6033G, maintenance and repair grounds. So, and that says 21,000. Then there's two below there. One says new request, one says sidewalk repair, and that total is 22,000. That's not, obviously not in the 21,115, right?
So correct. So the first line item is the existing budget. And remember, when we were coming up with our budget estimates for the 1920 budget, we took our estimated actuals that we thought we would be at June 30, and we added 3% to that across the board. So
Okay.
the number that you see, that $21,115, represents that 3% inflated number for 1920 on the very first line. So that's his current budget line that's rolling forward. The next one you see is a new request, is he requested his budget to be increased $7,000 from what it has been in past years. So instead of just saying his budget is $28,000, I separately listed his new request, requesting additional funds for maintenance and grounds of buildings. And then over and above that, we had that project that we were required to do that wasn't in the 18-19 budget, and we hurried up and added it to the 19-20 budget because we did have that urgent replacement of the sidewalk that had to be done, which I believe is complete at this point, and we're just awaiting the invoice.
Okay, so essentially, these are kind of wiggle room numbers that each of the department heads said, hey, I need an extra $7,000 to use for the
Correct.
grounds.
Right.
And I'm assuming that either the finance committee or the general manager reviewed those additional requests, or they wouldn't be brought to the
Correct.
board, correct?
Yes. And you might also see some through fire department where they made a request and that whole line is zeroed out. We
Okay.
left it there to show that I think there was some additional equipment that they needed that we just could not fund. So we left those requests out there in the event that, we have budget savings at mid-year, or there's, some sort of savings that we're recognizing, that we don't forget that those requests were unfunded and maybe they can be funded at a later time, or it's a reminder to fund them in next fiscal year.
Okay. I just don't want to, in addition to having the automatic 3% inflation, have additional things on top of that aren't very clearly explained. And so that's why and I appreciate the breakout for sure. And like Director Howell said, you're not going to make everybody happy, but this is sure much better than it has been in past years, including the numbers in red that are not nearly as big as they used to be, and the numbers in black that actually are there. So I very much appreciate the direction that we're moving, and I hope that we continue that way, because I still don't like any kind of budget approval from a board where we're in the red at the end of the year. That's not very good practice, in my considered opinion.
Agreed. All right. Vice President Farmer.
Just one quick question, since we're on facilities and resources at this moment. So as I was walking up, I saw that two fellows from facilities and resources were taking the roof off of the area right out here, and they said they were having a contractor come in to put on a new roof next week. Is that particular situation included in the budget? Has Carlos already requested that money, and we've approved it? I'm just curious.
It must be just a component of his current year's budget.
Okay.
I haven't had a new request for that, I don't believe. There was a roof request for the whole Vets Hall, but that we could not fund.
Yeah, I like the fact that Carlos has got his people taking it off and not paying a contractor to take it off at an exorbitant rate, too. So,
Carlos is in the back of the room if you would like him to elaborate.
Hello, Board. Happy to answer any questions. So as far as the shed out there, It is part of our Vets All budget. It is within the budget. And we're not only planning on replacing the roof, we're also going to be replacing the siding on that shed. And also there's a section on the side of the building behind the Legion that is also going to get repaired hopefully by next week.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Carlos. McKinnon will be very happy.
All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the resolution 32-2019.
I'll second that.
Well,
Somebody else said-
we'll go with the
Go ahead,
motion first. Do you want to do the motion, or do you want? I'll be happy to do it if you want to second it. For approving the CCSD budget for fiscal year 1920 and reserve for the encumbrances on the fiscal year 1819. Motion.
Okay,
Now I'll
second.
second that
All right.
and try to get my head unspaced.
Any further discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call vote?
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Farmer?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. All right, very good. Moving on, we're now on regular business. And the first one is a presentation by Mission Country Disposal, Mr. Carmel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief because we have a long agenda today. The district has a franchise agreement with Mission Country Disposal for integrated solid waste management services. Mission Country's applied for a 25.3% rate increase under Article 9 of the agreement. The agreement specifies the allowable profit and the rate adjustment review process. The district, along with the Cayucas Sanitary District, also has a franchise with Mission Country and received the same basic increase request, retained Bill Statler, the former longtime finance director for the city of San Luis Obispo and the author of the rate-setting methodology manual, to provide an independent review of this request. He's here to present his findings. Additionally, the board is also considering an increase in the franchise fee from 6% to 10% to help offset the significant costs now being incurred for cleaning up homeless encampments on district property. A 10% franchise fee is in line with the vast majority of public entities in this county, including Cayucas. Jeff Smith, Mission Country's general manager, is also here to make a presentation and answer your questions. The rate increase is subject to Proposition 218, and a draft notice is included in the material provided. Mission Country is responsible for providing the notice to the customers. The board's being asked to decide whether to include the proposed 4% increase in the franchise fee as part of the proposed rate increase and to establish a hearing date to consider protests under Prop 218. If the 4% increase is included and there's no majority protest, we'd bring back an item to amend the franchise agreement, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Smith. Jeff?
Great, thank you. I think we have a slide. Good afternoon, President, Board, Council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to present to you just some information about the rate increase, and I wanted to share, before Bill comes up, to share some of the financial components about recycling. Recycling is actually one of the biggest problems that we as an industry are facing now. Most of you heard about it. It's been a big problem in the industry, and I thought I'd just go back and give you a little bit of history and what we're doing about it, what we're trying to do differently in order to address it. But first, a little history. So I'm going to take you back to the 80s, but I'll get you up here really quick, I promise. Do any of you remember back the story years ago in New York when there was a barge floating off of the coast, and we all heard about this barge that couldn't find a port? Well, that story, there's just a little bit more information on that. What that story is about is the barge actually, New York had established a contract with the city of New Jersey in order to take their material. However, the contract wasn't yet signed, but that barge was sent to New Jersey before the contract was signed. When it showed up, New Jersey said, wait a minute, there's something wrong with your trash and we're not going to take it. So they actually sent that barge back out to the bay, and it sat out there for, I think it was about 6 weeks, as I remember. And that was the starting of people saying, where's our landfill space going and what are we going to do? Well, fast forward up to 1989, here in California, we passed AB 939. AB 939 required 50% diversion from the landfill for recycling material. Later on in 2012, told you we'd get up here pretty fast, right? In 2012, AB 341 was passed. AB 341 created a new goal of 75% diversion from the landfill. So that was in order to reduce the number of trash going in and increase the recycling. Well, the recycling mandates changed the industry, the commercial industry dramatically. It was also the beginning of many of the collection programs. But at the same time, China began to kind of rattle its cage. At that point, China was the number one contributor for the global recycling markets. They actually accepted most of the material from the U.S. I will tell you that here locally, John Ryan, and I apologize, I should have introduced my team. John Ryan back here, who's our MRF manager. And we've got Peter Cron, who works for us recently. Many of you may know him. He's currently working in sales and recycling for us. So they're here to help answer any questions we may have. But the reason I want to introduce John Ryan is back when this all started in 2012, in fact, before that, John, who runs the Cold Canyon processing facility, which actually takes all that material and recycles it and puts it through a system, he started working and recognizing this problem that China was manipulating the market and doing some things they were doing, the global markets that were happening. And John created a lot of relationships with local people, and I believe in Cayucos as well as up and down the coast with other places in order to take that material, including trucking companies and the like, in order to change some things. But a little bit more information, in 2013-14, China also established what they called the Green Fence. Now, the Green Fence mostly deals with plastics, and the plastics are items, if you look in the bottom of plastic containers, you notice they have a number 1 through 7 on those. Well, those all identify what can be done with that plastic. Well, one of the things that we've had trouble with, as you've heard about, is styrofoam. That's a problem, but that's one of those numbers. But polystyrene is another one people struggle with. Well, here again, John and his ingenuity has been able to find a location that actually takes those red Solo cups. I don't know if it's as big of a problem here, but in San Luis Obispo, where they have all the Cal Poly students with the parties, we get quite a few, let me tell you. But all of those can be recycled now. Well, anyway, in 2017, China began the new campaign called the China Sword. Now, this is what was happening in 2017 is, at that time, the U.S. was sending a large amount of material over to China, and of the material that was going, almost 20% of it was actually trash. There was a significant amount. Now, we didn't do that here locally, but a lot of people did. So they created this new rule that said we're not going to accept anything unless it's 0.5% or less, changing the market forever. It's never going to be the same from that standpoint. So what happened is what we did is we had to do some things too, because we had to improve it. When that happened, the U.S. markets also changed. They said, well, if China's not going to take it, well, we're not going to take it, right? Pretty soon, China started saying, well, we're not going to pay for it either. You're going to start paying us to get it here. So all these things started to change. Well, it also added some new costs. For example, our sort line. At the time, the sort line was taking about 20 to 22 tons per hour of material, and then it eventually changed, and now John had to slow that down, and it's now taken about 10 to 12 tons. Additionally, labor had to increase. Labor went up by nearly 100% in the cost because we had to put more people on that line in order to make sure the materials were being pulled off. You know, as a company, what we also did is we wanted to work with IWMA. We actually would still do, of course. They do a lot of work in regards to getting information out, recycling information. The most recent campaign is getting some stickers, new decals onto containers in order to make sure people can identify what the products that they should put in which container. We're trying to address a problem called wishful recycling. Wishful recycling, we refer to it. We have a lot of people who get the little small containers, and of course a family of 4 can't fit more than a bag or 2 in there, and you know they have more than that during the week, so they put everything else in the recycling can. And other times you've got people who just simply say, gee, I don't know if this is recyclable or not. Let's just throw it in the recycling can and see what happens, you know? So we like to call that wishful recycling. We also hired Peter to help us out and to kind of help educate people and make sure that we can do more in the community. And then, of course, we're always looking for innovative ways that we can address the problem wherever possible. An example would be we have that digester that many of you have heard about. That digester, what it does is it takes the green waste, the organics, which came out of that AB 341. That was one of the big components. It actually puts it into the system, processes all the gas out of it, turns it into power, and then that end product goes out into the community, the agricultural community. So it's a really great opportunity. We're looking for those kinds of things as we develop and going forward. Some of the things that have happened in the industry, some of the problems we faced. In Q4 of 2018, commodity prices actually dropped 60%. And in Q1, they had dropped an additional 34% in some of the areas. It was been quite a problem to deal with. And then over the years, pricing conditions are continuing to get worse. We know the rates going down. This past year, we've experienced even lower rates, and the problems are getting worse and worse. Contract labor is up by $800,000 since 2016. Recycling residual is at an all-time high. So I mentioned to you about wishful recycling. What's happened is that we were seeing about a 20 to 30% of that recycling material, actually closer to 20% of that material was actually trash. Well, it's up to almost 35 to 40%. So we're seeing a significant increase, which is rather ironic when you think about it, because more and more education is happening, and yet it still continues. But that's costing us right now about $100,000 a year alone just to get that trash out and dispose of it. You know, the cost to maintain a 20-year-old MRF has gotten very expensive. Our intent now, and I talk about ingenuity and going forward, we've been able to secure, John's been able to secure a significant increase in capital so that we can begin to update the MRF, put in a newer sort line and newer system that'll help a lot. It'll ultimately bring costs down as it's developed. Commodity pricing, I'm going to tell you, it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's still really bad. We don't expect it to get any better anytime soon. The best case predictions are that in 2022 we might see some improvement, but I do say best case because we haven't seen anything lately that's signaling that it might get better. I can tell you that a lot of the old facilities have been updated and upgraded in order to, or purchased, I should say, and put back online. In fact, ironically, a lot of them have been purchased by China, but that's another story. You know, if you want to know more about recycling, there's a lot to learn about it. You can Google it. You'll be surprised at how much information you get. And before I go into some final thoughts, I wanted to share you something new that we've recently done. What we did is we created a new app. It's called Recycling Right Slow County. You can actually find it on your Apple or Android and go out and look for it. What it does is you pull it up on your phone and you put in your street address. It'll tell you what day of the week you get picked up, which is a great tool for those people who come in and out of town perhaps and forget when to put their trash out. But additionally, it also gives you a place to where you can find recycling material, what to do with recycling, if you don't know something is recycling. For example, you can type in egg cartons, and egg cartons, it'll pop up with a picture of what the egg carton is, and it'll tell you what to do with it, just like many of the items that we have. Now, it's only been out for about 3 weeks, so I'll get more information out as we go. But I just wanted to share that with you, that we're doing everything we can to try and help people understand the right thing to do, because we know at the end of the day, if they do the right thing, the costs are going to be improved overall, so it's better for everybody. But I want to give you a few final thoughts. First, our company remains strong. We're committed to serving the community. We're committed to doing the right thing, the right time for the right reason. We believe that by doing that and by doing the right thing, we're not acting as some of our competitors have, and they're actually, we've heard and seen people are taking that that recycling and throwing it into the trash because it's cheaper to do that for them than to actually recycle it. You know, we're committed to continue the work of building and developing local relationships where recycled material can be processed at the lowest possible cost. And we're also committed to innovation and future of keeping the low cost down as much as possible. And with that, I'll just leave it if you have any questions about recycling.
Thank you very much. Very, very informative. My only comment is that you've got great people out there, as far as I'm concerned. Very courteous, always helpful, always helping you get around them if they're blocking the street and that kind of thing. I'm impressed by the people that you have out in the field. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I agree. I mean, I think we have some of the best people I've seen in years. They're out there. They're always, I get calls all the time about somebody that spilled something on the ground, or something's on the ground that was spilled by somebody else, and our driver's out there picking it up, and people are saying, hey, thanks for that driver going the extra mile. Who is he? Let him know. And let me tell you, we do. But we really do appreciate that. Thank you for that comment.
Good. Director Howell?
First to second what Director Pearson said, I really concur. Just 3 questions. What does the acronym MRF stand for?
Good question.
Could you give us the name of the app so that we can go out and get it and download it? And then third, what about right now it's single stream recycling. Would there be any economic advantage to the community to going with where we actually pre-separate our recyclables, as some communities do? would that reduce our cost to us? And would it be something that maybe we would want to look at?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me answer the first two, and I'm going to ask John to come up and answer the third one for you. But the first one, MRF, that stands for Material Recovery Facility. A lot of places outside of California have what you call a transfer station. That would be a TRF. And here we have a MRF, so it's a Material Recovery Facility. The app is called Recycle Right, Slow County. All one word for Recycle Right, and then Slow, SLO, and then County. It has our new logo on it, which you might see here. We just redid our logo, and the idea is we wanted to make sure that people knew that we were part of this community and here to develop it. This is all about who we are. We're here in the local provider and wanted to make sure everybody got to see that. So you'll get to see that logo on the app as well. And as far as the last question, John, can you help us with that?
Yeah, let me throw this thing in reverse. 30 years ago, that's exactly what we were doing. We were doing source-separated material in, if anybody here remembers, it was in orange bins. And you put loose paper, glass, aluminum in, and that was it. The reason everybody, and I mean statewide, went to single stream is it really increased our participation rate. You hear a lot of negative things about recycling nowadays, but you need to kind of keep in mind that this county, this community, this city here is arguably one of the, has one of the most active participation rates in the state. We're running 85 to 87% participation rates, and we've got a solid community that's doing recycling. The single stream system that we're doing right now is the most cost-effective way that you can do it, and that's why everybody in our industry went that direction. We're able to do more with less, and that's really the name of the game.
Thank you.
Vice President Farmer.
Yes, thank you very much for that comprehensive report. I just want to ask you, maybe it's just my little idiosyncrasy, but occasionally you'll be walking by, you find some trash on the ground, you throw it in somebody's recycling bin or in the trash bin, whatever is appropriate. And I often notice, especially in recycling, what makes somebody think that goes into recycling when it should be in trash? And you notice it around town because we have bins around town where recycling and trash are separate. How do you folks deal with that when you've got a lot of trash just coming through recycling? How difficult does that make the job of the person that's doing that, and for you folks with regard to cost?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's so simple for people, right? You've got your blue as recycle, and you've got your gray or black as your trash. But a lot of times I think some of it's people don't know, maybe perhaps they aren't educated. I'll give you an example. Coffee cups that you typically get, they're with a plastic liner. Well, those plastic piece in the coffee cup make that not recyclable, but we'll find those in the trash all the time. However, if you get the little plastic ones, those are recyclable, the cold cups type of thing. So it kind of depends on what you're using, but I think there's a lot of confusion out there is what people use, and we've tried to combat that. Working with IWMA, one of the things that John was able to do with the other MRFs in the area, the material recovery facilities, right? They've been able to identify what materials are recyclable and what aren't. So you can actually go to the IWMA website. They'll show the information there. You can also go to our website, and it has a link to that website. It also has our app information, help people. So I think the key to that is educating people more and more. We're trying to put those labels on the bins, and the residential bins and the commercial bins, to help people identify what the right materials are. It's not as complicated as it seems, but sometimes people just take the easy way out or just think they'll, I hate to admit it, but a lot of people just don't want to do it. It's too complicated sometimes.
I don't want to take any more of our time. I just want to ask you a question. I see, because of people buying stuff online, and it seems like more businesses get things delivered in cardboard. How is that working out for you folks? I would think you're having more cardboard. Now, that can be recycled, but is there even a market for that?
Yeah, another good question. Well, I can tell you cardboard is still recyclable. That's the good news. The bad news is it doesn't pay like it used to pay. It used to be one of the most significant paying commodities, and now I don't know the prices, but it's significantly lower than it has been in the past, so people don't use as much. The material packaging inside, in fact, I know One of our favorite users, Amazon, they send those little plastic things that say recycle on them. Those aren't recyclable, but the box itself is, but the plastic inside is not.
Thank you.
Dr. Steidel.
In terms of the app that you mentioned, the Recycling Right Slow County, are you targeting things like real estate and property management companies with that information? Because I would think that that would be a good resource for those folks to be passing on to their clientele too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. In fact, what I'm targeting right now is I'm going out to the chambers and talking to them and giving them information and start passing it out. So I'm hoping that we can start filtering out to the community. We've had it maybe 3 weeks now, so I'm hoping there's not too many bugs in it. I'll be honest, it's one of those technology things, and they never seem to go right 100% the first time. I've looked at it, looks good, but yes, that's a great idea. Hitting the individual businesses, apartment complexes would be a good one, commercial businesses as well. But everybody that has them, they're going to find it a very useful tool. So the more people we can let know about it, the better. I'd be happy to bring literature once we put it together here. Perhaps we can leave it for the community members to pick up themselves and how to get that app. I'd love to do that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here to sort of share the Reader's Digest version of a pretty comprehensive rate report. In working with Tim Carmel on this, he really just had 3 requests of me in making this presentation. The first one was to keep it short, and the second one was to keep it short, and the third one was to keep it short. So we'll see how well I do in following his advice. Assuming, of course, I can, oops, I don't know what I did. Well, there we go. The silver bars? No. Oh, wow. Too clever. I don't want to end show. Oh, you're going to do it for me? Okay. The report's purpose is really twofold, to analyze the solid waste rates for both Cayucas and Cambria. You share, why don't you go to the next slide? Cost effective to do kind of both at the same time. You have the same service levels. You have very similar franchise agreements. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. You have adopted in your franchise agreements, however, the exact same rate-setting methodology. And the financial information, really for all of the sort of north coastal communities from Los Osos up, is the same financial information. So, and to be honest, the county, which has some unincorporated areas as well as Los Osos, they'll kind of be piggybacking onto this report. So, in Cambria, in addition to analyzing the solid waste increase, there's been some interest expressed in potentially moving the franchise fee rate from 6% to 10%. So for you, the analysis also includes what would that mean from a rate impact perspective. Next slide. So the key findings are kind of 3. First off, you have a complete application. It's been prepared in accordance with the rate setting methodology. There have been 2 amendments since it was submitted back in October of 2008. The final application was submitted in July, on July 25th, 2019. You have a comprehensive level of service. You have curbside trash, recycling, and green waste. You have what's called single stream. You don't have to separate your recycling at the source. Then again, of course, there's a materials recovery facility at the back end that does that for you, but it's a significant convenience to customers at very competitive rates compared to other local agencies in the area. But one of the things that surfaced in the course of doing this analysis, and I should point out, I recently did a similar comprehensive analysis for all of the South County agencies, Rio Grande, Oceano, Grover Beach, Avila, Napomo. And what really surfaced is the rate-setting manual that we're using was prepared by the City of San Luis Obispo in 1994. So it's 25 years old. And I think in that 25-year period, the garbage company and the cities and the local agencies have been well served by having a very clearly articulated set of standards and procedures for rate setting. On the other hand, after 25 years, it may be timely to take a look at that, especially since several issues emerged in this rate review that really hadn't been on the table before, not the least of which, from the presentation you saw on Materials Recovery Facility, this has gotten significantly more expensive, both from a cost perspective as well as a revenue offset perspective than it had been developed. A number of other sort of issues surfaced that just made us believe it may be timely to take a look at the manual. Waste Connections is offered to pay for half of whatever that update would be. And if all of the other agencies in the county pitch in on the other 50%, this will be very inexpensive for any one agency to take a relook at that. So that's kind of my three findings. My rate recommendation is they've asked for a 25.3% rate increase in their latest application. I concur with that. Put in context, that compares, however, with their initial request of almost 40%. So through this process of trying to vet their proposal, kind of doing a deep dive on their costs, we have made some significant strides in getting the rate to be reduced, but for a number of key reasons, that's not possible, to get below that threshold. So what does that mean for single-family rates? That means for 32 gallons, which is typically the most common item, that's going to be close to a $5 a month increase. And I'll talk about why that's the case in a moment, but let's go to the next slide. There were a number of issues that surfaced as we went through their rate application, and from my perspective, we resolved all of those from an analytical perspective. So I'm comfortable with the rate increase that's in front of you and the reasons for that. Next slide. And there's a detailed explanation for all of the significant cost drivers in the report itself, but I think it's worth highlighting two. And the first one, of course, as Waste Connections mentioned, and that's the Materials Recovery Facility, that's the MRF operations. The second one is a significant increase in direct labor, which I'll talk about that too in a moment. So go to the next slide. On the MRF operation, it's a significant per ton rate increase. It goes from $10 2 years ago in 2017 to $67.50 in 2019. Should point out, I've taken a look at from 2017 to 2019 because 2017 is their last complete audited period. So rather than using at the time their best guess about what their costs were, I wanted to start from a framework of what's their most recent audited financial statements, and then just recognize that's a 2-year difference from that point in time. So in that frame of reference, it's gone from about $10 to $67 per ton. That's an annual cost increase from 2 years ago of about $264,000. It's about 25% of the total reason for the rate increase is directly attributed to this. And as you've heard Waste Connections talk about, that price reflects the market realities that are facing all recycling operators, and they have kind of the perfect storm. It costs more to produce the recyclable product, significantly more. And that's because the markets have demanded a higher quality recycling product. That costs more. At that exact same time that costs are about doubling to produce that, they're getting significantly lower revenues for the product that they can sell. So those are the two significant market pressures that are facing them, as well as all MRF operators. And in the case of the Central Coast, all other reasonable alternatives for you are significantly more expensive. In fact, the lowest cost alternative that's available to you is about $105 a ton, and that goes up to about $250 a ton, depending upon whether those recycling facilities will even take your product. So when you look at the market realities, when you look at the higher costs of other alternatives, what's being proposed at $67.50 is reasonable. It's not desirable. It's not the best of all possible worlds, but it's the best of the realistic worlds that confront you. So next slide. Direct labor, this is a little more awkward. It's up by 23%. The first component of that is what Waste Connections refers to as a market adjustment. And this makes sense. This is consistent with what I saw in the South County. And there's two factors there, about a 2% a year cost of living increase and a 5% market adjustment for attraction and retention purposes. And giving the very tight labor market that we've seen from 2017 to 2019, a 9-10% rate increase over a 2-year period of time for CPI and to account for market realities is reasonable to me, and that would be consistent with what we've seen in their other financial operations. On the other hand, about 14% of that, or the most significant component, it's due to a correction in their cost accounting and their cost recording for labor. Several years ago, they moved towards a more consolidated operation on the North Coast, made things more efficient, made them more effective. But one of the things they didn't totally adjust for was they're more pooling their crews with Morro Bay. And they really didn't accurately adjust for the fact that they were been getting a lot of support out of Morro Bay that wasn't accounted for in their cost accounting. Long story short, it is unfortunate this error is there. They did a comprehensive review of their timekeeping systems in 2018, and that's when this surfaced. It would be convenient to kind of say, well, if that's an error you've had in the past, you can live with that error, but that really isn't appropriate and that doesn't make sense. And a base year review like we're doing here is really the best opportunity to try and set that correctly for the future. So that's a significant portion of this is just a cost accounting revision, and this counts for about 30% of the total reason for the rate increase. It's a correction, it's unfortunate, but this is the best opportunity in this rate review to make that change. Next slide. So there are 3 factors in the rate review that I did. The first one, of course, is how much does it cost to provide the required level of service. The second one is, are these costs reasonable? And then the last one is, if those are reasonable costs, then what's a reasonable recovery on that? And the rate setting manual gives us some guidance on this. Next slide. In terms of are the costs reasonable, I looked at this really kind of like Judy Collins. I looked at it from both sides now, and actually 3 sides. The first one was a very detailed cost recovery review that's detailed in the report that you have of the key changes from 2017 to 2019. So very detailed analytics, looking for good reasons for that. The second one was to compare this cost increase with increases in the consumer price index. It went up by about 4.4% over a 2-year period of time, about 2% a year. If you exclude those areas like the direct labor, like the MRF costs, where we have separate definitive reasons for those, it increased by about 2%. All the other costs increased by about 2% over the same period of time, or about 1% a year. So, but for these key drivers, like the MRF operations, that you're not, being driven by the CPI, and other costs like the correction for the direct labor, which are not being driven by the CPI, that gives a pretty favorable comparison. And then the next bullet point. And when we compare your rates to rates in comparable communities, even with this rate increase, you will still have very reasonable rates, especially keeping in mind you have of the services that Waste Connections provides, you are the furthest away from the disposal sites. You're furthest away from the MRF, you're furthest away from the landfill, you're furthest away from the greenways. And so even when you compare that, you still have very favorable rates. Next slide. As you can see, when it comes to the 32-gallon container, again, you are at the low end of this. Only Morro Bay and San Luis Obispo, which have some strategic advantage over you in terms of location, have higher rates, but in Atascadero it would be higher. Paso Robles, it would be significantly higher, and higher in San Miguel and Templeton. And then actually, when you go to the other 2 sizes, 64-gallon and 96-gallon, I think you have the cheapest rates there, with maybe the exception of Morro Bay, and when you get to the larger containers, you have the cheapest rates in the area. So even with this rate increase, which by any measure appears to be significant, you will still have very reasonable rates compared to comparable communities in the Central Coast. Next slide. So if the costs are reasonable, what's a reasonable return on these costs? The rate setting model organizes this into kind of 3 categories of costs. The first one is called allowable costs because they are allowed to earn a profit on those costs that are considered allowable. On pass-through costs, they're allowed to recover the costs, but they're not allowed to earn a profit on those costs. They're just allowed to recover them fully. And then there's another group of costs that are just plain excluded altogether. No pass-throughs, no profit. They can't consider them in the rate-setting model at all. So next bullet. On the allowable costs, they're allowed an 8% profit margin. For the pass-through costs, recovery but no profit, their landfill fees, their MRF fees, franchise fees that they collect on your behalf, and any transaction that's a related party transaction, they're getting the service from their parent company. As long as that cost is reasonable, they can pass it through. This is like the MRF cost. They can pass it through, but they can't earn a profit on it. And then on the no profit includes entertainment, charitable contributions, income taxes. There are significant limits on corporate officer compensation. And so those are excluded altogether. Next slide. So when you put that rate setting model together, which I'd be happy to go in further detail if you'd like, that comes out to that 25% rate increase under a 6% franchise fee. And so from the MCD rate request, I believe the costs are reasonable, and the proposed rate increase meets the reasonable return criteria that is in your franchise agreement. Which leads us to the second issue, and that's possibly increasing your franchise fee from 6% to 10%. You really have two rate impacts. Even if you weren't considering a rate increase for Mission Country Disposal, you'd be looking at a rate increase that's necessary to get to that rate increase. And that's about a 4.4% rate increase. Mathematically, it's a little higher than the 4%, because if you raise the rates by 4%, they have to pay more franchise fees on the 4%. 4.4% mathematically gets them the right amount of revenue that they can give you a 10% franchise fee. And then, as you may have noticed in the rate review that I did for Cayucas, which is at 10%, given this rate review, you would have a slightly higher rate increase because we would need to evaluate the rate increase based on a 10% franchise fee, not a 6% franchise fee. So when you compound those two rate increases, they're not additive, they compound on each other. That's a 32.05% increase. It is intuitively about the 26% increase plus the 4% increase to get you to a 10% franchise fee, but there's some compounding in there. And this is just an example of what the rate difference would be for single-family residences. The difference between a 6% franchise fee at 25% and the 10% franchise fee. And so for a 32-gallon container, it's about another $1.30 a container in order to move your franchise fee forward. And with that, I think I'm on the last slide. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you very much. Questions? Anyone on the board? No? Director Rice.
Thank you for being here. It's nice to meet the person that created the rate setting manual, because there's a lot of detail in that thing, and I'm glad to hear that you want to look at it again. I totally support that, especially in light of all the new regulations they have to follow regarding recycling and what percentage has to be recycled and all of that. I do not support the agencies having to pick up 50% of the rate study bill, because that's going to probably be passed through anyway to all of the agencies as a cost, I would imagine, when they do the next count of their expenses and what offsets they need to help support that. So I think that the agencies are going to pay for it one way or the other. They should pick up the full bill and then charge toward the. First question is actually for Mr. Carmel. When is the franchise agreement up?
In 2025.
2025, okay. And we did that in 2010, primarily because, if I remember correctly, because of the vehicles.
That's right. They wanted to transition to natural gas trucks.
Which are not, correct me if I'm wrong, are not being used up here because there isn't a fueling station close enough up here. Is that correct?
So we actually have 10.
Thank you.
We actually have 10 new CNG vehicles we just purchased, and you're right, we're limited on fueling here, but we have sent some out. It's just kind of a difficult because of the fueling, yes.
I totally understand that. The infrastructure's not there. Couple of observations that I have. First is using the same financials as Los Osos and Cayucas concerns me a bit. Los Osos does have a larger population of disadvantaged and lower income folks. We are really far out here, and it may be that if we don't use the same financials, the rates go even higher, but I think if they're trying to justify the rates they want to charge us, seems to me that the number of tons of trash and recycling that leave this town versus Cayucas versus Los Osos should also make a difference, since part of their cost is the tipping fees and what it costs them for the recycling. So that's one of the points that I'd like to make. The alternatives, which would be extremely more costly than, I don't think that anybody is arguing we need to get rid of this company, but I also think it's not a basis for raising our rates, because the only other possible alternative would be super expensive compared to what they're asking us to pay. I don't think that's a good foundation to say we're going to charge you more, because if it's not us, it's going to be these guys who are going to be way more expensive. And how much other communities pay, to me, shouldn't factor in. What should factor in is the distance we are from the dump, from the recycling facility, how much it costs them in gas to get here, and if they're not using the natural gas vehicles, that's a shame, but a reality that I recognize with the infrastructure. But I remain unconvinced that this rate basis is clearly articulated in a way that makes me comfortable, and I'm not going to be supporting this today, because I just can't, I don't find it to be, I don't find the basis to be solid.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions or anything? I do have one question for Mr. Smith. You're not using the one-armed bandits or whatever they're called, that kind of truck in Cambria. Is there a reason for that too?
You're talking about the side load trucks with the arm system?
Yeah,
We actually do use them. We use
men.
both. We use the one with the arm system. We also use the rear load manual for some areas. There's some areas that you go to that you just can't get the truck into, and so you end up with the rear loader truck because of the roads or whatever, perhaps the size of the road. If I can add too, by the way, we did purchase those 10 new CNG trucks. I want to tell you, we actually have 40 in our fleet now. We're trying to build more and more into the county. And you're right, there's an infrastructure issue, but I just wanted to tell you that I can appreciate what you're saying, but if there's anything I can do to help you understand where we are on this, it would be a great opportunity to do that.
Okay, so it's the size of our roads that's really keeping us with the rear trash loading. Okay.
To some degree, and there's some areas where we're actually looking at rerouting in order to get more of those trucks down here, because there are some possibilities where we can get into areas. We've purchased some smaller trucks so that we can actually get into some of those roads that are automated arm systems as well. So as much as possible, we're trying to move to that direction.
Okay, and that does allow you to decrease the number of people on the truck, right?
It does. You get one person per truck when you switch to that. The challenge is if you get into a smaller truck, you have less capacity. So a larger truck holds about 30 yards, where a smaller truck only holds about 8 yards of trash. So it's a significant difference, which can be a problem. So we have to be very careful how we go about that.
Yeah, especially since we're so far away, you're running back and forth. That's not good either.
Yeah, each way is about an hour up and then about an hour back. So we want to minimize those trips as much as possible so we can spend our time here picking up, and we try to limit it so we're just one trip up as much as possible. So we aren't spending that time traveling back and forth.
Okay, very good. I guess I would like to get a little bit more clarity from Director Rice as to why she's not supporting. I'm not an expert, obviously, in this stuff, and I read through all of the information and everything, and it seemed like it made sense to me. Okay, especially the fact that the recycling now costs so much more than it did before. But if you could give a little bit more information, that would be helpful to me.
Okay, I'm glad to share that. One of the concerns that I have is I understand their costs have gone up. That's a completely understandable thing. There's always been some sense that I've had of, it took me for, the first time they came to Cambria for a rate increase under the 218, I went to try and find the rate setting manual, and boy, was it not easy to find. I'm glad that it is more easily accessible at this point, but I'm still not convinced that there's some issues that are related that were already brought up by, I'm sorry, I don't have your name right at the top of my brain. Bill, thank you. I was going for the last name, but Bill works. There are still some issues with the way that the costs are calculated and where things end up. I frankly would like to see those changes done before we have another rate increase, since the person who did the rate setting manual is an expert on it and says these are some things that maybe aren't exactly, even though he's comfortable with the numbers, there's still too much, for me, there's still too much wiggle room. Now, I could be convinced into approving an increase based on what they've given us already and the fact that the community gets to vote, because it's a Prop 218, so it's not just our decision. And I definitely think that the community should get a chance to have their say on it if we don't increase the franchise fee, because that's simply a pass-through. And if we need money to clean up the ranch and we're not already dedicating this money to ranch cleanup for homeless encampments, maybe there's a way we can have a side agreement to have this company help us get rid of some of the extra yards of trash that we keep having to clean up. And it might reduce our cost in that way without putting additional costs onto the customers.
Okay. Carlos, you've gotten help from these people before when you've needed it. Am I correct with that?
They are fantastic to work with. So we've gotten a lot of help from them. They've been very helpful in assisting us with bringing in 3-yard dumpsters close to where the homeless occupants are so that they could dispose of the trash. And then the drivers go in there and actually empty them out every week or whenever they're full. We also utilize their services on most of the entrances to the ranch, where there's 32-gallon containers there, and they get picked up every week. So the service that they provide for us is excellent.
Okay, very good. And I'd also like to say that Carlos has been very good at actually recruiting the homeless to help clean up their areas and help us out. So that's another kudo for Carlos and his team. Vice President Farmer.
Yeah, this is very quickly, and Carlos, this is addressed to you once again. On page 78, I was just curious about a statement that was made here with regard to the cost of cleaning up the homeless encampments can range from $5,000 to $25,000 per location. And I know that you've cleaned up a number of camps. I believe yesterday I was talking with General Manager Weigold, and we're up to 52 encampments, which to me, if I'm just using the lowball number, that's like $250,000. I'm assuming maybe it's not quite that much, but I know it is an expense. Is what we're seeing here correct?
So the cost varies drastically as the numbers show there. We are currently working on a contract, or I'm working on a contract to get 2 areas, one in the Fiscalini Ranch and one on CCSD-owned lots passed on to us by the Land Conservancy. The estimate to clean both of those areas with multiple camps includes a portion of green waste removal of the trees and the material that's been used to create these camps. The estimate is between $25,000 and $30,000 just to clean those 2 sections. It doesn't include my staff, our equipment to be able to go out there and assist. So it varies on the location, it varies on the amount of material that's in there, what's in these camps, how we're going to be able to remove it. It's all dependent on all those variables.
If I could just ask a quick thing that I just thought about. I know that folks in our community are very active in a volunteer basis, and it's been considered that maybe people in the community could pitch in and helping cleaning up some of these camps, but it's because of some of like the needles or other things that might be dangerous or harmful to people that are just out there helping out. The community really can't get involved, right? You're not advising that.
We're not, to this point, we're not asking the public to help us with that because of some liability issues.
Right.
And again, some of these areas where the camps are not only the stuff that's there, but the ability to get to them is also quite a task. So at this point, we're not asking for them. I know that the Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch are looking at asking the community for donations to be able to utilize towards the cleanup as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Howell.
Director Rice brought up some points, and I'm still struggling with them a little bit. I did read through the study and tried very hard to understand it. I thought I had a pretty good handle on it, but now some doubt is being cast. Is it possible to postpone this discussion until we have a little more chance to hear from Director Rice on her concerns, or do we really have to do this today?
Mr. Carmel?
You don't have to do it today. If you really feel that there's a need for more information, you could certainly continue it or consider it at a special meeting or a next month's regular meeting. I'm not sure exactly where we'd be going. We'd need some very specific direction if we're intending to bring back information to answer those questions, because frankly, I didn't quite understand the comments either.
Well, there's a if I might, if you go to page 102, which is Appendix A, the base year rate adjustment application, you'll notice that the first line item is CNG trucks and infrastructure. Now, why is that 4.83% being charged? This is on top of page 102, Appendix A, page 1 of 6 at the bottom of the page. 4.83% for CNG trucks and infrastructure. Well, if we're not having the benefit of that, maybe what needs to be there if they need that money for additional fuel or additional maintenance because the trucks have to go further and they're not using the CNG trucks, that's one thing. But if we're having almost 5% of the increase come from things they need to do on trucks that don't get used here because of no fault of theirs, because their infrastructure just doesn't exist for them to get all the way here and all the way home without refueling. So I think that I mean, just on that item alone, it's just a concern. Like I said, it's a complicated that takes into account a lot of the costs and expenses and the things that would be appropriate to make a profit on, the things that are not appropriate, the things that should be a pass-through. And I think it's very good at doing that. I think there are still some problem areas. And this, as somebody who's been looking at this since before 2010, when the new agreement was put into place, I'm very happy, and I welcome the change to the rate manual. I think that it needs to be done before we have, and we may find that the amount that has to go up even higher than 25%. I'm not saying this necessarily financially benefits the community, doesn't necessarily make a financial hardship on the other side. I just want to be very clear, because we are trying to be transparent about what's going on, and I think that it needs to carry over to everything. That's all.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Smith, would you like to? Sure.
I'd be happy to help explain that a little bit. CNG infrastructure is a combination of things. There's a small amount for CNG. Infrastructure includes things like other new trucks. It includes operating equipment, includes facility, site. For example, we're spending about $500,000 over the past few months at our facility to asphalt some of the facility for environmental concerns and so on. Those costs are shared throughout all the communities, so everybody does pay a part of that, not just here in Cambria, but all of the other districts that we serve as well. So all those costs are partly associated. I will tell you that the rate manual is designed 20 years ago. With that being said, it's not a bad thing what it is. In fact, it actually limits how much profit we can make on the business. We've done a significant job in the past year trying to cut our costs and bring them down further. And as Bill stated in his information, our labor costs, although they went up a small amount, there was a small allocation issue. I would tell you that Morro Bay has probably a little less on the labor cost, but they're going to experience other things, and I've been talking to them about that as well. I'd be happy to explain further, but I also wanted to say that today what I thought we were going to do was get approval to send out a Prop 218 for notification. It wasn't necessarily about going through this further. I would be happy to sit down and go through this further with you all to make you very comfortable on where these numbers are, and I'm sure Bill will help facilitate that as well to help explain it. But the information that went into this to figure out where our financials was is all audited by Caliber. It's all there. It's very clear. It's very plain. Every dollar can be seen. There's nothing that's in there that would be confusing if you want to look at the detail. We'd be happy to share that with you through the auditor, perhaps. Maybe you'd want to sit down with the auditor and do that. But again, I think what we're here to do, what I thought we were here to do, and help me if I'm misunderstanding, was to approve the ability to send a Prop 218 out for the rate increase and allow the community to go from there. So again, if you'd like me to sit down further and have a rate study or have a study with you all, I'd be more than happy to do that. Or with you, Pam, as a finance director, or anybody else who would like to participate, or Tim, I'm happy to do that with anyone. We'll bring a team together to do that as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. We do have one request to speak from the
excuse
public.
me.
Okay, yes.
Just something I wanted to bring to attention. If you look at page 101 instead of 102, which is 101 is the Cayucas. And you'll notice it says trucks and infrastructure. For some reason, it says CNG trucks and infrastructure. The exact same percentage exists, the 4.83. I'm inclined to think what we're talking about is a line item identification, which is driving the concern. And if we were to look at it in the way that it's expressed at Cayucas, it just says trucks and infrastructure. I think it's a presentation anomaly.
Okay, yes. Are we okay to go to
Maybe clarification as to what really is on the table. Is it the case that it isn't the rate increase that Mission Country is asking, but rather what we have to approve isn't that, because they can do whatever they want with that, right? What we have to really discuss is that change to the
Franchise fee.
to the franchise fee. Am I right? Okay, just to
Yes.
get clarity.
Yeah,
on
we're going to get to that hopefully here in a minute. Hey, okay, Ms. Richards.
Leslie Richards, Cambria resident, and the franchise fee is what I want to talk about, from 6% to 10%. I just read the agenda packet 15 minutes ago. Total cost to physically maintain vacant parcels. Well, gee whiz, the hens have come home to roost. The statements I made originally when you adopted these parcels a couple of years ago, not this board, but a previous board, was how much they were going to cost to maintain. And at the time, the statement was, nothing. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. It went from $22,000 to $56,000. Thank you very much. That's the part I protest against. I didn't even know we had a franchise fee until 2010 when the contract came out. These hidden fees. President Pearson, I appreciate that for you, it's not a big deal. For me, it's a big deal. I am not wealthy like you are. I can't afford all these rate increases over and over and over again. Every dollar for me affects me adversely. Rate, water, or trash. I appreciate this was a fantastic presentation by these individuals. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact how we are stealing from Peter to pay for Paul now. We brought up the issue of maintaining these donated parcels from the Slow Land Conservancy, how maybe it wasn't a good idea because it's going to cost the district a lot of money. And now we have Carlos confirming exactly what I said a couple of years ago. And we're about to take on more parcels from Land Conservancy somewhere in the near future. So these accurate bits of information that should have been used originally originally for that first donation of parcels wasn't. And by the way, you guys just made me a $50 bet because I betted $50,000 to maintain those parcels and you hit it at $56,100. Thank you very much. So please, you need to discuss this a little more carefully than just making a vote on it for a 218 today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, open for discussion on the franchise fee. Director Rice.
I just am going to repeat my opinion that I think that we should stick at 6% for now, and because it is just a direct pass-through to the trash customers, and it's money we could use, but I don't think it's money we should be charging.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay.
Wait a minute.
My feeling is close to the same. We do need the money to do what we need to do out at the ranch, et cetera, et cetera. However, this is one of these hidden taxes that we put on people that, okay, they're going to get a rate increase to pick up the trash, and that makes sense based upon the information that we've been given. I would much rather have an approval on getting more firefighters than I would, doing this one. So I'm kind of conflicted. We need the money because we have a lot of stuff to pick up and that kind of thing. But at the same time, this is one of those hidden fees that, okay, if you pass the garbage rate, which they deserve, you're also going to get hit with another 4% by us. So, Director Howell.
Yes, I'm falling in that area too. I see that there is a necessity. We do need the money, specifically to some of the maintenance on our vacant parcels. At the same time, I had the same feeling in a way. It's just as people, because it's just another hand in folks' pockets. And what we want people to understand that we don't consider that those pockets are bottomless. And so I think it would probably be wiser to go ahead and recommend that the increase that the company is asking for, that we would recommend to our citizens, but that this other issue of how to fund our cleanup costs maybe would be better addressed separately, possibly with some input from the public. Perhaps we could get some other ideas. But I agree with you. I think this is yet another hidden, another attempt to just pluck money out of folks' pockets without really being noticed. So I think I would vote against increasing the franchise fee at this time.
Okay. Yes, Director Steidel.
I'm in agreement also. I hate to characterize it as plucking things out of people's pockets so that it seems like it's some nefarious, kind of thing to do. What it is basically is a potential revenue resource. But that being said, it's still an impact to people where I think the garbage fees are appropriate, and it's appropriate to take it to a 218, but I don't know that it's necessary to handle the franchise fee at this point. We'd probably be a little better off getting a year or two down line, maybe even, and considering it. We have yet to really understand or get the full impact of our rate increases during our own recent 218 and what that's going to do in helping to stabilize the district.
Okay, so I need I'm sorry, Director Rice.
I move that we schedule a public hearing in accordance with the requirements of Proposition 218 on the proposed increase from Mission Country disposal without the increase for the franchise fee percentage.
Okay, motion has been made. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Did I get that right?
You got it right, but can we talk about a hearing date? Because we're going to have to pick a hearing date today. So there's a 45-day notice period. So we're probably looking at either October 10th or 17th, giving them sufficient time to
Okay,
get
so
the
doing
notice out.
it during one of our regular meetings, is that what you're saying?
Unless,
Yeah.
that's preferred, I think,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So.
Schedule it at the October regular board meeting?
Yeah, the 10th
10th,
would be my preference.
10th work.
Get that out of the way.
So
Is that enough time? We have still leaves us 45 days? Okay.
that gives them adequate time. Gives them about 10-day buffer if they
Okay,
get it out
so
tomorrow.
amending it to include the October 10th date.
Correct.
We now have a motion and a second. Do we have further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Oh, I moved.
Director Rice?
No, I did. I'm trying to decide because I know which way it's going to go, but I support sending this out so the community can have their say. So, yes.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. Passes 5-0. We may want to call you back at some point to get some more explanation. Maybe at our next meeting, which is September 12th, I believe. In the meantime, Director Rice and I may put our heads together, or a couple of us may and send you a letter asking, these are the things we would like clarified, if that makes sense to you. And that's also good. The public will also get that information through us, and that will, enable your public hearing and stuff to go better. Okay? All right. Very good. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming and for your terrific presentation. We appreciate it. Very thoughtful. All right. Don, how are you? We're going to take a 5-minute break, no more than 5 minutes. Let's be back at 5 minutes after on the clock in the back, okay? We need to move forward, so 5-minute break. Number 4B, consideration to approve a change order on the cleanup of the impoundment basin. All right.
Ready to go, Mr. President. So the staff is recommending that the Board of Directors consider and approve change orders to West Coast Tree Service, as well as Grandstaff Paint and Pressure Wash for increased costs that were incurred in the cleanup of the impoundment basin at the Sustainable Water Facility. As you know, the CCSD was directed by the Regional Water Quality Control Board to clean up and decommission the impoundment basin. This was an effort that had some time constraints on it, particularly because it was in our interest to get this done before our annual bond premium payment, which is a tune of $71,000 and $71,649. We also picked two local contracting firms to keep sort of money in-house in the community. Both, in retrospect, this is my description of, I think, how they felt, but both of them, to a company, were overwhelmed by the size and scope of what was required there. And they vastly underestimated the resource and time and effort that it was going to take. Both had to go back and get more equipment to tackle the job. In the broad scheme of things, we did look at one outside company who was close to $500,000 to do the same job. So keeping that in perspective, and the fact that we saved on a bomb premium, we kept local contractors employed, I think that the district was well served in the end. Again, it's expense that we really were required to do, and I think given all the issues with time of year, to try to get this done before the rainy season set back in, then we're just chasing the weather through the whole winter. A lot of time and effort, both on the contractor standpoint as well as our own staff, because both of these contractors work with staff and on some of their own time that they weren't compensated for, honestly. I spent a lot of time working with both contractors over the last week. And the reason, honestly, why this report was late is we were negotiating right into this week to try to come to agreement on what the right thing to do was for them and for us. So both of these numbers really represent a good, fine compromise between us and the contractors. I don't think anybody's happy, jumping for joy, either side, but I think this is a fair deal across the board. Pending your questions.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? Oh, Vice President Farmer.
This isn't necessarily a question, but a comment, because I happen to have the good fortune to be out there when John Rocky and other folks from the Regional Water Quality Control Board came out to examine the finished product, so to speak. And, of course, the first thing that John said, J-O-N, the first thing John said was a fantastic job. And Jim Green said that he had talked to Robert Grandstaff, and he said once he got started, he said, man, I way underbid this job. And so we walked down, and by the way, I should mention that West Coast Tree Service hauled away 84 tons of brine, which is like, I mean, I just think, how could I wrap my head around that? But we walked down into the base of that, and there's all these little crevices and everything like that. And John Rocky, once again, I believe he said, this looks like a much bigger job than it looks like when you're standing up there. And just on that alone, and I don't feel like this increase is all that drastic, and realizing what I think an overwhelming job it must have been, I don't see any problem here.
Okay, very good. Anyone else? Director Rice.
With that endorsement from somebody who is consistently bringing up the cost of the SWF, I can't see any reason to not move that we approve the change orders to West Coast Tree Service and Grandstaff Paint and Pressure Wash for the increased costs that were incurred in the cleanup at the impoundment basin.
Was that a motion?
Yes.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you. And moving along, we are now going to move 4G up, which is the discussion and consideration of extending the outstanding intent to serve letter for the Boris Pilch LLC. Is this, Mr. Weigold, is this one yours?
So I'm going to bring up Melissa Bland. Thank you. I'm going to bring up Melissa Bland to talk through this one and present it, as it's been an ongoing extension issue for the district.
Good afternoon, board. Am I on? Okay, I didn't know I was going to be presenting, so it's pretty straightforward. 6 months ago, we extended their request to extend the intent to serve letter for the 12-unit multifamily project on Green Street, and there were some questions about like parking and egress issues that we could see pretty clearly on the plans, and then also some concerns about the affordable housing intent. The county was telling them that they had to have at least 2 of those units be affordable housing units, but they were not at that point trying to make the entire project affordable housing. Their extension right now is being requested so that we can review an application that was filed concurrently to convert the entire project to 100% affordable housing, I believe at the moderate income level. The only other changes to the plans involved their original plan had granny units that had access from, there was external access and then access from the other internal units, and there was just some permitting issues with that at the county level, so they've removed those. Other than that, it's just one set of plans. It'll either be 100% affordable or it'll be a standard, using the pre-existing intent to serve letter that has been extended for 2 decades. And that will just have whatever the county mandates as affordable, which is, I believe, just 2 units. So this is an extension for just another 6 months.
Okay, thank you. In their application for extension here, they indicate that the intent to serve letter was first issued on 2/28/19. That's not correct. When was their initial? It was back in 2000, 2001?
This one has changed hands several times. I do believe that the original application was filed in, I believe 1998 is as far back as this project goes.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
The letter goes back to 99.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so they've had a letter since even before the moratorium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I do have a slip here that Ms. Richards would like to speak on this one, so let's do that first so we can handle her questions.
Sorry, I know we're rushed here. Leslie Richards, Cambria resident. You brought up exactly the question I was going to ask, actually, was the original application was in 98 or 99. The second question is, there's some ambiguity here on their actual application document for extension. They write down 12 meters, 12 separate meters. We are extension for the 12 separate meters. And I thought the original application from 98, 99 was 1 meter for 12 multifamily units. So is this 1 meter or 12 separate meters here that's being applied for? Because the 99, 98 project was one combined multifamily project, apartment complex. It was 1 meter for one project. So this is in their document that they attach application for extension, and there's a signature that's not even, you can't even tell who signed it pretty much at the bottom, but it's for this meeting, and it has an expiration date. So I think that needs to be clarified before you do another extension on this. Is it 12 meters or 1? From the original application, from the original project. Because I remember the original project before 2000 was an apartment complex, multifamily, which has now been broken into 12 separate meters, 1 meter to 12, question mark. Thank you, bye.
Thank you. All right.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Our code requires that each home or unit is separately metered or individually metered.
Okay.
So
is
it would.
Our separate metering, or is that their separate?
It's our separate metering. So they'll each get a bill, just like people's self-help housing.
Okay.
Just like, new apartments.
Yeah, so that way we can tell if someone is abusing the water or not, and we can pinpoint it instead of having just 1 meter for the whole thing.
Well, there's a lot of advantages, but mostly it brings the best source of revenue and the best way to check how much water they use.
Okay. Director Howell.
Okay. I'm a little unclear. I did regards, I think I remember some wording in the codes that seemed to imply that some properties could be on a master meter. So I'd like to review that just to be sure that if that was the case, it is no longer the case now.
You might be talking about a mobile home park.
It is possible. Yes. So that was just one question of fact that I had. I'll save my other comment for a moment.
Okay. Director Rice.
Initially, I believe there were several properties in town that were on 1 meter and they had to go to more meters. Was there?
Not that I'm aware of.
What?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So we can talk about the condo unit that's down by, I don't really know what it's down by, but it's down that way.
Some condo unit. in
And it
town.
has one master meter, but when they have leaks or somebody's toilet runs, we don't know whose it is because there's one master meter and they don't get individually charged for each master meter.
Right.
Or I'm
so
sorry, for each unit.
I was trying to tease out whether or not that master meter policy ordinance was changed over after they had their intent to serve for multifamily, or if this is for 12 multifamily units. And we're just kind of confusing meter versus
Positions.
a position, right?
Well, everybody calls water a meter,
Right.
but they're really positions.
So is this for 12 units of multifamily, or it's for a multifamily project? It doesn't matter how many, do you know? That would be a question I'd like to have answered before.
Yeah, there are 12 buildings that they're going to have,
It's
so they
12
would need a meter for each.
I think it's 12 multifamily positions.
Okay.
And so it equals 12
Got it.
water
Thank you.
meters.
Thank you. That's helpful clarification.
Okay. You're back.
I'm back. Yeah. Question. Did this property, this property, or this intent to serve letter, was there a wait list position? And if so, what was it?
No, it goes back to 98 before
So
the
it was
wait list.
before the wait list?
Yeah,
Is that
before the
correct?
wait list.
Okay.
I don't know if it's before the wait list, but it's multifamily, which is a
So,
much
okay.
shorter list than
So
single-family
Is it
residential.
on the multifamily wait list?
I'm sure it was at one point.
That's my question. Yeah.
So when a position is offered, or when someone on a wait list is offered an intent to serve letter, they get pulled off of the wait list, and their intent to serve letter remains valid as long as it's successfully extended. If at any time it is not successfully extended, that they would be returned to the wait list in the order that they applied. So I believe that if there's 10 people on that multifamily wait list right now, and it was the earliest one, it would bump everybody back, and it would go to that position that they were originally applied.
Thank you. I think that clarifies it. So to restate it, if we were to deny this letter at this point, they would simply go back to whatever wait list position they had on whatever wait list they were on.
That's
Is
my
that
understanding,
correct?
yes.
Okay. Vice President.
I'm hoping that the questions I'm about to ask are pertinent to what we're addressing here, but I guess my concern is, and this item has been discussed at the NCAC, and their land use committee didn't look very favorably on this project. And I'm just curious as to what income levels are being considered with regard to who's going to be living there, what the cost of the housing is going to be. I mean, the people self-help housing but in 50 years, they have had 53 projects, so I feel like they're pretty credible. They have a background. These folks here, I don't know them. And so those are things that I'm concerned about. And also, the fact that it's on this relatively steep hill and the way things are set up, you're either going to be walking uphill or walking downhill to take trash, to take groceries in and out, and the parking is a little bit awkward, and it just seems like a project that I don't feel, especially the location, narrow streets, I just don't feel all that favorable to it. And I also, maybe this is way out of line, do these folks intend to still own this property? Or once everything gets built, are they going to sell this property?
They can't.
They can't.
Well, that's...
There are county regulations associated with how this can be. I'd have to go back and take a look at my notes, but it goes back in different kinds of increments for different circumstances, but it ranges between 50 and 75 years before anything could ever be done with it in terms of the county's regulations for how these kinds of structures are handled. And it has to be, there are all kinds of qualifications that are associated with it. And in addition to that, the definition in terms of moderate is something that is already defined by the county in terms of income and in terms of the range that the house sale can be offered. So all of that's contained legally within the county land use.
I guess I would just like to hear it from the person that is proposing doing all this building, exactly what their plan is. That's what I'm saying.
I think they're still, quote unquote, negotiating with the county as far as exactly what they're doing. They've made, if you'll remember the plans that they brought to us last time, they've made a lot of improvements. A lot of things are a lot better than they were. They got rid of the granny units. They got rid of a lot of the other things that we were talking about. I think Vice President Farmer, you even brought up the number of parking spaces weren't enough and that kind of thing, and they've now fixed some of that. And I think they're still in the process of trying to get it to where the NCAC might look favorably on, and the county would actually go forward and give them a permit. Now, whether they're going to have, be able to have 12 moderate units and get that past the county, when I think that regulations are that they've got to have some that are of lower income on the property, I think all of those things are still up in the air. And I think that's the only reason that I'm in favor of giving them an extension to a letter that they've had for over 2 decades, okay, to see what project they finally come up with, okay? And I think that's where we're at, in my opinion. So I'm for giving them this extension for 6 months, even though we all know 18 months to 2 years is what it's more going to take. So we're going to be able to revisit this and look at it again before we make a final decision and stuff. So that's where I am. So Director Rice?
Since we don't have land use authority and we have to work cooperatively with the county and any applicant who would like to build, I think that it's prudent to have a 6-month extension, because it also doesn't mean that we necessarily are going to approve them going forward at the moderate level, since that's up to the board when we get to that point, and I think that the applicant understands that. But in order to give the county and the district and the applicant a chance to go through all of those negotiations, they need another 6 months on their intent to serve. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to actually give them connections, whether it's 12 or 10 or whatever level of income that they are at, under the changes that we recently did to the affordable housing allocation process. I do think that it's prudent at this point to give them 6 months to look and see if there's anything they could do that this board might consider actually issuing.
Agreed. Director Stidel.
I agree with you in that regard. It's the reality is that because it's still going through the county discussions and county process, something I'll point out is I believe when this started, this had an accommodation of different levels of affordable housing, including workforce. And they've taken workforce out of that. So the highest level of potential income and money for which the residents could be sold has been eliminated from this process. I'm expecting that there's going to be some some point where the negotiation or the considerations that they're having to go through with the county will reach a level where they will be put in a position of having to use a mix of affordable housing that's so low in definition that it doesn't pan out for them to even build, or that the county will be able to define for them the constraints that they can work within that will still allow them to pen out, and they will choose to go forward. And I think that's where the rubber will meet the road on it.
Director Howell.
Okay, several things. First of all, moderate income is 120% of the median income for this county. Now, I don't know what that is. I think Director Rice might have done that. Could you let us know what that is, actually?
I think it's 58,000.
58, I would say more like 80, but the median, so 120% of that would be about 80,000 a year for a family of two. I don't consider that exactly low income in any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. Now, I would like to also, I spent a good deal of yesterday and today wading through the county code. So workforce is not included in the affordable housing exemption under the Growth Management Act. So that's one reason why they removed it. Okay. The other, so here's my position on this. I will not vote for this, to extend this letter for several reasons. One, they've had the letter since '98. Nothing has happened. The property has been sold back and forth with that letter attached to it. So it's been going on a long time. I think that whatever arrangement we might have entered into with the original property owners, we are not under an obligation to continue that letter. Second, then that's why I was asking about wait list positions. When this came before us the last time, then affordable housing was in there, and it wasn't in the prior application, if I recall. And so I feel that in a way, the property owner is attempting to jump ahead on and beyond the restriction of the growth management ordinance. So that's on that side of it. The other thing is, while the CCSD doesn't have land use authority, it nevertheless has a certain responsibility to the community to see that the community is not put in jeopardy and that the people here are not put in jeopardy. And I do feel that to approve and I think it would be do a disservice both to the community and to the property owner to offer something and put them to jumping through hoops when they may not be able to go forward. And it would be better, in my opinion, if we were to deny this, terminate this intent to serve, let them move back onto their wait list position if it's wherever it is, and if they want to build affordable housing, apply for affordable housing allocation through our own procedure and not try to back into it this way. So that's that side of it. Again, putting the community at risk to approve 12 additional units when we really do not have any idea how much water we actually have, nor do we have a clear idea as to how much we will need. It would be irresponsible at this point, and we do not know whether the drought is in fact over. It could very well. We don't know if we're going to get another year of rain or 2 years of rain. We simply don't know. And so I think it'd be irresponsible for this board at this point to jeopardize the community's water supply by allowing an additional 12 units to be built at this point. The other reason is permitting these units to go in at this point in time, in view of the fact that we have no adequate evacuation route for this town, and especially for Lodge Hill, and the developer wishes to put these at the bottom of Lodge Hill. I would suggest that until this problem has been addressed, that we would be irresponsible to allow it to act such that continued development could proceed on Lodge Hill before that is addressed. I think that's highly irresponsible. So I really think that this intent to serve letter needs to be terminated and be brought back under our regular procedures for reviewing the affordable housing allocations. The other thing I'm a little concerned about, my understanding of the process may be incorrect, but should we grant the intent to serve letter, I'm not sure that we have another opportunity should they break ground before the letter is expired. I don't know that we'll have another opportunity to look at this project. Do we have, and you'll have to answer, the staff will have to answer me. Once you grant an intent to serve letter, accepted the fees, done what you needed to do, at what point can the district have is there any possibility later that the district could say, wait, we're sorry, we don't have enough water, you can't go forward? Is there any point once we have actually gone so far and have broken ground, can we back off?
No.
The answer is no. So the fact that that we do this, and it's quite possible if they don't get their work done and we have to extend again, then yes, we'll have a chance. But if for some reason, by some miracle, they actually get this through the Planning Commission, based on our intent to serve letter, I think our input is done. And I think we forfeited the opportunity to do anything regarding this. So I highly recommend that we, in a spirit, though, of not being punitive, just ask that this developer, if they really sincerely want affordable housing, to review our code and go through the procedure. Final comment on that. There is a certain number of agreements and covenants that have to be entered into for the affordable housing to be granted from the county point of view, but there is also language in our code where we want to see that those covenants have in fact been done, and and for example, there needs to be an organization contracted with the developer or with the owner of the property to determine eligibility. There's no word about this at all. So at this point, I think we would be premature, and we should really send this back to the developer and say, we cannot give you an intent to serve letter based on what you've given us. And we're sorry, but please go back to your waiting list position. And if you want an allocation for our affordable housing, come back to us.
Director Stidel.
Well, look, there were a number of things there. I guess the first is the structure of having someone as the third party definition in that is something that's all in the language of the county. So for them to be able to get through and get approval to build, they would have to address those with the county before they could ever break down ground. It isn't something that we would have to impose upon them. It was something that by ordinance, the county would impose upon them, and it would have to be defined and legalized and stated. So I don't know that that is a limitation in terms of what this is. I guess my only other, if we look at something going the opposite direction, say, okay, what is the potential risk? Because there is potential risk associated with not extending it for another 6 months while they have shown good faith and they've been working with the county and they've gone through and made extraordinary numbers of changes which have made this whole build more viable and has, at least from what I was looking at in the blueprints, pretty much addressed all of the items that the county had asked them to take a look at. What position would we be in by not extending and not put ourselves in jeopardy legally? Because the intent has been served by the requester all of this time and has been in process.
If I can just build off that a little bit, if the board is seriously going to consider denying this request for an extension, I'm going to suggest you continue the item so that we can develop some written findings to support the denial.
You would have to, or you'd be in legal jeopardy. We could be sued with a drop of a hat.
Yeah, Director Rice.
Something you said earlier, Mr. Carmel, confused me and seems in conflict with something that's on page 134 at the very end of the staff report. It says, until such time as their AHP application has been considered by the board, they would like to maintain the existing intent to serve. So extend the intent, this is what my understanding was and the foundation of my support for extending the intent to serve letter was that they still have to come back to the board for the application for the affordable housing.
Right, we're dealing with two entirely different subjects.
Right.
You're extending this project, not an affordable housing project.
Right, but if we extend on this one, the answer that you gave was it doesn't come back to us. Is that true?
If they choose to go forward with this project on that extension, it does not come back to you. If they choose to convert their project to an affordable housing project, they're essentially going to be, in some ways, starting over with us.
Because the intent to serve essentially would become an active meter, because that's normally what, none of us here were here when that process was going on, because it was so long ago that we did those things. So I'm just trying to understand the process. So if we extend the intent to serve and they are able to get their permitting to break ground, we're out of luck.
That's this project that you're extending, yes.
Because it's a live project.
It's a live project in the pipeline.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I understand now.
Director Howell.
Thank you for that clarification, because I do think that pretty much says the situation is we will be giving up any opportunity going forward should we approve this now. As to what, it is true that the county must approve, but it is also in the language of our code that in other words, when they come, apparently the process is, as far as Cambria goes, somewhat backwards from what it goes with the rest of the county. When they go to the county, when they're coming from somewhere else, they have to have the plans, the intent to serve, and everything before they apply for an allocation. In our case, we have to provide an intent to serve before they go forward with the allocation. So it's a kind of backwards, and that's because of our unique situation and the fact that we do have constrained resources. So I agree that should we decide not to extend, we do have to proceed with due caution and make sure that everything is very clear. The argument that we've put them through a whole lot of additional work to no end, I don't think is a legitimate argument. It doesn't move me. In other words, this is something that everyone has to do when they go. These are not the only developers that have had to go back and forth through the drawing board many times. So I don't see that. No. In other words, I do not believe that the fact that we extended the letter before has put us under any obligation to extend it at this time. The other thing is the age of this letter and the rather checkered history of the property. And I have to say, although I don't have a lot of evidence to this fact, but I'm just not comfortable with the way this project is being handled. And I feel in a way that we're being kind of trying to be manipulated a little bit. So I think we do have to concern where we are legally, but that is always a concern. We have to remember you can always be sued by anybody for anything. The real question is, can we defend ourselves? And so as long as we have a defensible position, I think we can go forward. And as I would say, as we do have the ability, due to scarcity of resources or other constraints, to affect this process legally within with both the county code and our own code. So again, I'm not changing my position, but I just wanted to clarify those points. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Two quick things. First is a moderate income for two people in this county as of 2019 is $79,900 for two people. Just there's that number. The other thing is going to escape my brain right now. I think it's important that this discussion, as well as a discussion last week and probably a discussion every month since I've been on this board, has cried out for us to actually finally have a discussion about what is enough. What do we mean by enough? Do we have enough houses? Do we have enough water? Do we have enough water for the houses? Do we have enough wastewater capacity? I don't think everybody says I want to have enough, but my idea of enough might be completely different from your idea of enough. And I think there's enough for everybody if everybody stops freaking out, because we actually have had a discussion about really what's reasonable and what is enough, and what does it cost to have that level of enough.
Okay, thank you. I have another request to speak, Crosby Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. President and Board. I just wanted to bring to your attention, I have the county planning letter here describing some of the items required for acceptance of this permit application, which may be relevant to your discussion. It says, because the sites are separated by intervening property, each site will need to be processed as separate applications. Please submit a separate general application form, land use permit, blah, 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 and they give the APN number. So the county seems like they're treating us as two separate projects, which perhaps would need to have two separate intent to serve letters or something like that. I think that would need to be clarified. Thank you.
All right, can we move along, or are you?
I would like a clarification from Mr. Carmel as to Mr. Schwartz's point.
Well, I'm not sure I understood his point. We're being asked to extend an intent to serve letter.
If it's on, if I may, what I believe he was saying is that because the Planning Commission is wanting two separate applications, the question is that going to require two separate intent to serve letters, or can one intent to serve letter go on? Is that anything that is of any concern to us at all?
No.
Oh, okay, that's a good.
All right.
I would make one final last point.
Sure.
I'm sure everyone here feels that the community does need more affordable housing. I would have to suggest, though, that moderate income is not the level that this community requires. The people who are really hurting and the people that we need to be here and working with us and for us are making a lot less money than that. And so I'm not really moved by any kind of moral concern to make a moderate level housing available when we don't have the other available, which is where we really should be looking, in terms of our limited resources and how we go forward. I would prefer to see those where I believe the community needs it, and I don't think we need moderate at this point, but that's just my own opinion.
Thank you. Vice President.
Thank you. I just want to add very quickly and piggyback on what Director Howell just said, that the people that are really challenged by the cost and lack of housing in this community are the people in the service industries and working in the restaurants and the motels. Those are the ones that are having to leave here because they can't find affordable housing. And that's really the problem, more than somebody making $80,000. Thank you.
I'm not going to disagree, but at the same time, our wastewater people and our water people are the kind of people that we also want to live here. Okay, right. And those people are probably in that moderate category. So, all right, yes.
Well, $79,000 when you use the number sounds huge, except it's probable that both parties are working. So what you're really talking about is $40,000 a person. And $40,000 a person is roughly $20 an hour. That's not excessive.
Okay. Do I have a motion to do one or the other?
All right. I guess I'll stick my neck out. I move that the board deny this intent to serve letter and request that the applicant be placed back on the appropriate wait list.
Okay, do I have a second for that motion?
Second. May I offer a friendly amendment? That
Okay.
we direct staff to bring back findings for such.
I accept that, yes. Good.
Agreeable.
Well,
I mean, how would we word this now?
if we're going to extend, we have to extend today because it runs out August 20th, which is 5 days. So.
So are you saying we need to extend it in order to get findings?
Yes, I think that's appropriate. If you want to extend the letter of intent for a month to give Mr. Carmel and his people information for us in order to for us to understand where we're at, I think that would make sense. Okay, extending only for a month, let him come back and say, okay, here's the risk that we're running, and then go from there. But if we deny now, getting the findings makes no difference because we've taken the risk at that point.
Good point. So I would accept that change then to extend for 1 month.
Okay,
so that we can have findings.
Could we maybe just withdraw the motion and start fresh with a fresh
Yes.
motion with
Yes.
better information?
Director Rice, you want to try this time?
I don't, but I will. I move that we extend this letter of intent to serve for a period of 1 month and direct staff to bring back findings and of the risks and such related to extending this intent to serve letter.
Or denying it.
Or denying it.
Denying it?
Or extending
Yes.
or denying?
Denying it.
Yes.
What's the risk with denying?
The risks of denying it.
Well, what I would be bringing back
Findings.
is a resolution with findings supporting the denial. Is that where you?
Right.
So,
So direct staff to bring back a report of the findings for denial.
okay, I second that.
Very good. We have.
I don't understand what it said.
So if I'm wording it correctly, my intent is we extend the intent to serve letter for a month so that we can get additional information related to the risks of denying the intent to serve letter before we make a decision to deny it. Is that the understanding that you had of the motion I made?
No.
Okay. So I'm glad that I restated. Is that the understanding that you had? Take a poll.
Sort of.
Okay. So I want to make sure that we're clear, though. Mr. Carmel?
My understanding was I'm being directed to go and draft a resolution supporting denial of this permit, a request for an extension with findings to support that denial.
I think that then that says that what we're doing today is making a decision for denial, and we need to bring back findings as a matter of protecting the board and the district, correct?
That's correct. If what you really want to do is essentially meet in closed session to discuss the potential issues associated with denying this, that's completely different. That may have been what you intended, and certainly I can bring back material to support that.
I'm feeling there might be some consensus on the board to do that, but that is not the motion I made. The motion I made was actually for denial and to have the findings brought back. And if the board doesn't want to do denial, then you have vote no on this motion.
I want to go try again. Yeah.
And then we would have another motion. So the effect of this motion is we would deny.
Withdrawn?
No, that's the new one that I made.
Okay.
So the effect of voting yes on this motion, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you were extending it for 1 month.
And that isn't what was just verbalized by Mr. Carmel.
This is what happens when you put me in charge, Director Howe.
Sorry.
So I thought there was a motion to deny and direct staff to bring back a resolution supporting that denial. Extend the letter for 1 month and direct staff to bring back a resolution supporting the denial.
I see where my confusion came in. Because we don't need an extension if we're going to deny it today, but we do need to have the findings come back.
Yikes.
Well, denying it today would be denying it without findings, and I'm asking you not to do that.
I see. So we would need to continue it.
At least for a month, yes.
So
basically,
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, let's try again, if you don't mind. What we're trying to do is postpone this action long enough to get some input. So can we basically extend the letter for 1 month, period, and instruct staff to come forward with findings?
With a resolution supporting a denial.
Supporting denial.
Right.
And maybe there won't be any, in which case, but we're not actually denying it now, so passing this motion now would not effectively deny it.
No, it doesn't deny it.
Pushing it down the road.
You're extending it for 1 month and telling me to come back with a resolution that supports a denial.
With findings.
You don't necessarily have to approve that resolution.
But we don't have to pass it.
I think the confusion, I think the confusion comes into hearing the language, come back with a resolution for denial, where what's embedded in the resolution for denial would be an accounting of the risks associated with.
It would actually be the facts supporting your decision to deny.
But you don't have to make that decision when those findings come back. So
Correct.
we could make a different decision. Okay, that is the initial intent that I had, was that what you just described. What he said is my motion.
So you're going to move to extend the letter of intent for 1 month and direct staff to bring back a resolution for consideration with findings supporting a denial.
Yes.
Okay.
I second that.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. Thank you. On to item 4H.
Do we need a motion to extend? We're almost at 5.
Yes, I need a motion to extend
I
until
move.
6 o'clock, actually.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, we have a motion to extend until 6 o'clock tonight. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. All right. Thank you, Director Rice, for catching me on that one. It's now discussion and consideration to appoint a chairperson for the policy committee is the next item up on our agenda. Director Rice resigned last week, pardon me. And we need to have a new chairperson. We have also received a resignation from Mr. Lyons from that committee, so next month we will have to have, again, consideration to fill a vacancy on that committee. But in the meantime, based upon who has subcommittee or standing committee chairmanships already, this is either between Vice President Farmer or myself. I am willing to take that burden on if the board so desires.
You first.
Well, personally, knowing how hard that our president works, and the fact that, let me just say this is going to be kind of an unusual offer. I've attended the ad hoc committee, was a member of the ad hoc committee of the infrastructure committee, when a member of the ad hoc infrastructure committee when I was elected to the board, and that went for a year with former Director Behringer and myself. And then we had the standing committee, which I was on for a year. And then we kind of did a little switch with regard to the chairperson being a member of the standing committee, but only one board member could be. So at that point, I removed myself from that committee. So what I'm offering is that I'd be willing to take Director Howell's place on the Standing Committee for Resources and Infrastructure if he'd be willing to do the policy committee.
Okay.
Again, I guess I
you
should
better
answer
talk.
that. I guess I should answer that. Yes, I am willing, much as I enjoy the infrastructure work. Mr. Farmer his involvement has been much longer than mine, and so I would be happy to hand that over. I think it's unfair to ask the president to do much more than what the president is doing. If I were in that chair, I don't know how much more I could take, so it's a big job. So I think it's only fair to split it with us other folks. So I would be willing to switch over. It has the advantage is I do like reading documents a lot, so that might be an appropriate fit.
All right.
I would move approval of musical chairs to have Director Howell chair the policy committee and Vice President Farmer chair the resources and infrastructure committee. And I have a comment to make after that motion.
Okay. So we have a motion. Anyone want to second that motion?
Since I guess I'm probably the only other one. So I'll say, okay, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Further discussion, Director Rice?
Just my quick comment. I appreciate that the workload is shifting around because of me, and I very much appreciate that. And I appreciate the willingness of all of you to take on the extra work that I haven't been able to pick up. So thank you.
Great. We can have a roll call vote now, please.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. All right. I think we can get one more thing done. If you want to, Mr. Carmel, can we take items that we don't do today and just move them to the September agenda, or do we have to have a special meeting next week?
No, you can move them to September's agenda.
Okay. So, Mr. Weigold, are there anything that's left here? Items C, D, E, F, and I, okay, that your staff needs us to act on today so that you can get going, that you don't want pushed until September?
Did we cover E, reserve policy?
No.
I would like to, if we have the opportunity to have the reserve policy put in place,
Okay.
that would be.
Okay.
Unless, I don't see anything on there unless.
There are two members of the policy committee here probably for the policy item who've sat through the whole meeting. They're right back there. Mr. Rohrbaugh and Mr. Lyons.
For the policy committee?
I'm sorry, and Vice Chair Heinrichs.
We just took care of that.
The policy committee has an item on the agenda to approve certain three policies. It's on 4D.
Okay, so D and E both. All right, let's hit item D, please.
Oh, God, he's gonna
4D is Director Rice leading the policy committee, recommending that the board of directors review the format of the attached draft policies, consider adoption of the same, and provide direction for continued review of the CSDA policy handbook. Is there a policy committee member that wants to talk to? Thank you.
Okay, I do have, as I mentioned here, we do have support with two of the members that put in a lot of work as a sub-op information. But it's sort of a general situation that the intent is to have a direction of what we've put in the manual so far is acceptable in the format. If you don't want to approve those particular sections at this time, that would be maybe less time-consuming at the moment. If you've had a chance to look at them, they took each section. The 1,000 section was the first one that was put together in the book, and it just did the three first ones, 1,000, 105, and 110. And with those, we were getting the information back from the standard in California and compared that to what we had existing. In a couple of cases, we did not have existing. So we put in those sections and then made the comments that they were existing, and if they were, what the differences would be for what the changes would be needed approved by the board. I know Don might want to change things around, and that's why it's a gray area of what we've agreed to at this time. But the intent is the format so everybody else can start contributing to our manual is the intent. Has everyone read this sections and saw the comments? And because there's nothing really sky falling type work we've done yet. That's why we want to move forward today, if we could, to get approval on the format, at least.
Okay, so basically what you're recommending, your standing committee is recommending is that we use the CSDA format for our policy manual going forward.
That's correct for the format. The other part that we were unclear on is how to present that information of one versus the other for their standards versus our standards, and say you would have a choice of these two arrangements. And our recommendation would be this, as it's written in the fine print, you might say.
Okay, very good. Questions, comments? Director Stidel? No?
I was going to make a motion if...
Okay.
Make a motion for adopting draft policies 1,000, 105, and 1,005 and 1,010, and to continue use of the format of the CSDA in development of the additional policies. Okay.
Second.
I was trying to stay silent as chairman of the committee. But yes,
Second.
So.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Can I possibly interject? I'm sorry to interject.
Sure.
There's just one statement in here that I think needs to be deleted in 1000.3. In the last sentence, it says a copy of the proposed new or amended policies shall be made available to each director for review at least 72 hours per Brown Act prior to any meeting at which the policies are to be considered. That's not what the Brown Act says, so can we strike that per the Brown Act? Can we remove those words from that?
Just take per Brown Act.
What the Brown Act says is you have to post your agenda 72 hours in advance, but written materials can be handed out at the meeting or anytime. It's obviously a benefit to get them 72 hours in advance, but technically that's not accurate.
Okay, so all you want to cross off is per the Brown
Act.
Yeah.
Because we still want them 72 hours in advance. It's just not per the Brown Act, is it?
Right.
Okay.
Very good.
So to amend the motion, friendly amendment, I guess, can I do a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
The friendly amendment to the motion is stated to remove from policy 1000.3 in the last sentence, per the Brown Act.
Okay, very good. Roll call vote now. Sorry, Ms. Clerk, I'm rushing you, I know.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. All right, moving on to item number E is the approval of the reserve policy as crafted by the Finance Standing Committee. Ms. Duffield.
Yes. So item 4E is for discussion and consideration of approval of the reserve policy. The staff is recommending the board discuss and consider approval of the attached reserve policy. This is an updated reserve policy that the Finance Ad Hoc Committee has created. It updates our current policy into a more current fashion, if you will. And I believe there are still, Director Steidel can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's still some thresholds that have to be determined to approve this policy. Is that correct?
No, I think the thresholds were
Did we add them?
established, the 1,000 and 1.1% of revenue.
Oh, yes, we did. Okay.
So that was all.
They're added.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the policy is available for your review and consideration.
Okay. Any comment? Yes.
I think on the whole, the policy is very good. There are some wording things that I found perhaps not as clear as they might be. For page 127, the heading policy, use of district reserves is limited to available unrestricted funds. I'm a little puzzled. I think I know what this means, but I don't think it's clear. So could you expand on that maybe, or possibly? So the intent could be a number of ways. I'm just not sure I understand it.
The unrestricted would be those funds that can't cross over. In other words, you can't be taking reserves from enterprise and using it in the general fund.
So the use of the reserves means the spending of moving the reserves out of a reserve and
Right,
into
right, and that's where it's those funds are unrestricted, or unrestricted. I said it the wrong way around. Limited to available unrestricted funds. So you could take from the general fund to the enterprises, but we also have policies in place that require the repayment of anything that moves from the general fund between them. So those are guaranteed in their. Ted is going to clean it up for me. Thank you.
The reason I'm asking is...
Are you the vice chair?
Yes.
If you're the vice chair, we'll allow you to.
Yeah.
I didn't see him sitting back there. I deferred to him initially.
Restricted funds are funds that have been received for specific purposes. So, for instance, a grant to fix the roof on the Vets Hall would not be available for creating a reserve. An unrestricted fund, such as general revenues, the normal property tax receipts, or the rates that are paid, are the kinds of funds that are eligible to be used for creating reserves.
So, if I may, so the term use really means that the money that can be used to put into reserves.
That's correct.
As opposed to taking money out and spending it.
The taking money out.
That's a different issue.
Is a different issue. There are a number of ways to encumber or create liabilities. And the general category of liability that we're talking about creating reserves is unassigned reserves, which are either just general reserves for contingency or reserves that have a purpose, but that purpose hasn't been codified yet.
So would another word such as if we said, what I want to see, because I'm hearing that, and I was kind of wondering, because to me, use means the spending of the reserves, and what I think you guys meant is how the reserves get filled out.
Well, there are two parts to the policy. One is how do you create a reserve, and the other part is how do you use a reserve? How do you spend a reserve? And in this case, the noun use refers to the creation of the reserve. It's the use of funds to create a reserve. It's not a use of reserve for a particular purpose.
Then perhaps we should say the use of funds to create the district reserves. is limited. Because as a layman, what I heard, when I see use of reserves, it sounds to me like spending. And then when I went further, wait a minute, this looks like income. So that's why I was raising the issue. If you could, it's not clear to the layman.
I don't have the document in front of me, so I guess I'm not really quite set to do a lot of wordsmithing, but I think that the document says that reserves may not be created from restricted funds.
So creation,
if you want to try to wordsmith that, that's fine. Pride of authorship is not one of my sins.
So could I offer this and see if it works? If you just said creation of district reserves is limited to available.
This isn't creation, this is use.
But
it's use of funds for reserve.
Use of funds for reserves. Thank you. So use of district funds for you see, I know, Pam, you probably understood this completely.
Yes,
and I hate to spend time on this, but it's important to have this.
Is this the only one you've got?
Yeah, the other is just grammar, and meaning is more important than grammar. So.
Okay. Use of district reserves is limited to available unrestricted funds, including donations, interest earned, fees for service, tax revenues, or other non-grant earnings. All special use funds will be designated for formal action by the board. So, just replace the word reserves with funds on that first line, and then I think we're probably all set.
Does it work?
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
All right. With one change, okay? And the other is that we need to get this in the right format, right? So if staff would work on getting it into the CSDA format, which I believe finance stuff is chapter 3 or something like that, right? So this would be a 3,000 document of some kind, right?
And the policy committee hasn't gotten to the policies yet that would call for having a purpose. So that's something that's not yet in the standard format of the policies we just passed, but I think it can easily be incorporated and probably is in that section.
I think it's in the CSD, I think, too. Okay. All right. So with one minor amendment from Director Rice, we could have a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Second. Good. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye. All right, we're on to...
Thank you to the Finance Committee.
Yeah, thank you for a good job on that.
Thank you very much.
We're on to future agenda items, and certainly we're going to move from today, items number 4C, number 4F, and number 4I to September 12th. No? 12th. The September 12th meeting. Also, the R&I committee is recommending that we have a town hall, and I would like to set the date of that town hall as September 7th at this venue, starting at 10 o'clock, and the subject of that town hall will be an information session focused on the current aspects of the SWF and how it operates and what it does. We will not be talking about the history of it. We won't be talking about the further uses of it or any of that kind of stuff. We'll just be talking about what it's used for and how it operates. Okay? Sure.
It kind of expands basically on what you're saying, President Pearson. So the Resources and Infrastructure Committee recommends that the CCSD sponsor at least one town hall meeting regarding the EWS/SWF with the following goals: to describe the EWS/SWF, which you said, to explain its function, and to the other part which we wanted to add is to describe the coastal development permitting process. We felt that the public may have been unclear about that as well. So, and the decision as to most appropriate method of presenting this information is left up to the CCSD board and staff, but we further recommend that Arlen Singwald be invited to attend.
Okay.
Let's just
we can invite
add to that, yeah.
All right.
And I can give you the text of this.
We're checking the Vets Hall calendar. Did you already book this on the calendar?
I already booked it.
We were checking to see if it was available.
Good job. So what is the time on that? Do we have?
Do you want to start at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock?
Probably 9.
It's on calendar from 8 to 2. Did you need it longer than that?
Well, set up and all that kind of thing. So, and breakdown. That's why Nancy and I got a big wedge there so that we could decide where we're going to go.
Okay.
I think 9.
I think 3 hours is going to be more than enough time. So we either start at 9 o'clock or at 10 o'clock. It's up to the board.
Which would get the better attendance? Do most people get up early, or do they sleep in on Saturdays?
I mean, you could argue it both ways. There's the possibility of it drawing out. It's kind of like spending money. You'll spend whatever you have available.
Right, yeah.
So maybe 10 o'clock to noon, that might be a natural break that way.
All right, let's do 10 o'clock till noon then.
Yeah, okay.
Is that good?
That allows folks to go to the garage sales first, and then they can come.
Good point.
If they're at the garage sales at 9 o'clock, they're late.
Actually, that's true.
All right, so we have a motion, and we can go ahead and take a voice vote on this. It's not really a motion,
We
right?
don't need a motion.
Okay,
It's not on the agenda.
it's on the agenda.
Is it not on the agenda?
Okay. So we've set a date of September 7th from 10 to 12 at the Vets Hall for the town hall. All right, thank you. We are now adjourning to closed session. I'll now open closed session.
Public comment?
Public comment on the closed session, please.
That's agenda item 6.
Yes.
Nobody?
Nobody? All right. We have 35 minutes.